what we want to do is build this physical location in Anandpur Sahib, Punjab, which is the birthplace of Khalsa. It's going to have our traditional ways of living, bungas, round mud huts, horses, organic farms, cultural activities, Shashtar, Vidya, Akharkari, the horse riding, the writing Gurbani by hand, making everything very simple and rustic and connecting us to the ground. So Khalsa prophecy tells us that the world will experience a very hard time where technology fails, there's war, and only those people will succeed who effectively, using modern terms, off-grid, growing food, self-sufficient in community. Those people are the ones who are going to succeed. A lot of people in the West have already understood that message. But the Gurus told us this a long time ago. The Gurus used to have something hundreds of years ago called the Dharamsala. That permanent settlement was what was the Guru's Dharamsala. It was an entirely organic lifestyle. The Gurdwara, which we're all familiar with, the building, you've got the prakash, you've got the langar, you've got programs. That's a very colonial concept. The first time I heard the Simran, I had tears in my eyes. So it was very much a reawakening of something which, from past life, you can say. But nature is what was my way in. Nature brought me towards the Guru. So when I meditated, I had a darshan of the Guru, and everything suddenly became clear to me. So a Dharamshala is a nature reserve, a community, and historically there was only ever Dharamshalas. There were hundreds of acres, sometimes thousands of acres of wilderness. And Punjab was wilderness in the past. Jungle Book, literally lions, tigers, streams. Big wilderness with little settlements. We can imagine some kind of ancient Scottish settlement or an ancient Native American village. So a Dharamshala is basically a traditional village with ethnic and spiritual culture, and living with the common purpose of serving the Guru and to serve the world. We want to give people an opportunity to attend camps, stay, experience the lifestyle, attend workshops, attend retreats, do Seva. The Dharamshala is that village. It's going to be the organic permaculture which feeds into the langar and provides us with the medicines, the wild herbal medicines which grow over there as well in abundance. But the Gurus did not grow wheat in big agricultural fields because they did permaculture with the trees. And that model of farming is a colonial model of farming. The Gurus didn't actually eat wheat, they ate millet grain. And I want to talk about food and the way that in our entire diet's colonized. Everything we think is Punjabi food is not actually Punjabi food. It might be shocking, and I'm going to drop some bombshells now. Many of the foods that we consider to be Desi Punjabi are Mexican, right? So aloo, tomato, mircha, potatoes, tomatoes, hot peppers, bell peppers, beans, corn came from the Americas. The Portuguese gave it to us only about 120 years ago. The Gurus have never tasted any of this stuff. Our ancestors' staple diet was bajra, millets. The earliest colonization of Europe came hand in hand with agriculture and wheat. And that's something we've written and explained in a lot of detail. And the whole history is on that website of gurmatkhalsa.org of how the colonization of Europe occurred. Because what wheat did is it made people reliant upon the market economy. But what they did is they colonized people, they cut people's orchards, they cut people's trees. They said, we're going to give you wheat. And what that did is that reduced people's life expectancy. So that's why they talk about history and say people used to have just a life expectancy of 35 years. So a lot of people died. Some people lived, on average, life expectancy was low. People were malnourished because you can't just survive on a diet of empty calories of wheat. So most people, and 90% of Europeans and British, were peasant labor. Only 10% or 8 to 10% were the middle classes who were gentlemen farmers. And only the 1% were the very elite who could even afford meat. The meat and honey and milk were for the elite. And the same applies in India. And I've talked to elder people and I've done this research, is their diet is neither vegetarian nor vegan nor non-vegetarian. It's none of these things. It doesn't fit in any box. The Guru's movement was an Aboriginal movement, much older than any of these competing cultures. Everything we do is spiritual. We need to have this calligraphy. But we need to have, and the Gurus have told us the value of being physically fit and strong, internally and externally. And that's why we have the akhara. An akhara is like a dojo. And that's where you learn the martial arts, you learn your physical fitness that was set up by, Guru Angad Dev Ji, he came up with this daily akhara. We're going to be working with some of the leaders in the Shastra Vidya world to bring us that training of the ancient ways of doing things, not just Gatka. Gatka is a performance art today. This explains how, when we say Sawa Lakh, when we say that the one Sikh was equivalent to many hundreds of thousands of warriors, it was because he was using out-of-world energies, not just a science of how to operate the weapon. He was somebody who was very difficult to defeat at a spiritual level, but we've lost a lot of that, but it still exists. Women have such an important role to play. Even on the battlefield, the protection of the gurus and Sikhs' grandmothers was with them, because the bana was hand woven. Every single stitch was done with Vaheguru. Imagine the strength. You're bulletproof, you're arrow proof on the battlefield. That also explains how Sikhs were so successful. They're carrying the physical blessings. Women are still weaving. They meditate, and whatever comes into their mind, they weave it into their fabric. The Gurus focused on the more tribal aspects of these things. Let's not forget our name is Singha. We are named after an animal spirit. We were given that name as a totem. We were formed as an indigenous tribe of people with a unique culture, a unique identity, but albeit open to everyone from all directions to come and join. In other words, our origin goes back to the beginning of effective time of human evolution, because our ancestry is a spiritual ancestry from Satyug. The Gurus came from Satyug. They didn't just suddenly turn up. The Gurus have given us that gyan, and yes, you're right that it was an artistic way of living, a creative way of living. It wasn't a drab life where you just do your 9 to 5, you're stressed, and art is maybe a hobby for some. It wasn't a hobby, it was something that you did every day. So the Gurus had a vision. Everything for us was designed with a spiritual vision, right? But everything that the colonists have given us has an agenda. That's also designed, but in a bad way, to bring us down. The Guru's agenda or vision was to bring us up, to raise our energy, to make us live a good life, not just as individuals, but as a community, and to help Mother Earth, because our survival depends on that.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Illuminating Dialogues. This episode is a deep dive with Dr. Preetam Singh. I appreciate him taking all of this time with us to explain the whole Eco-Village in Anandpur, how that's going to be set up. If you like the cinematic and you're going to watch the full thing, be sure to check out his GoFundMe page. All of that money, all of that donation goes towards the project of Anandpur Sahib Eco-Village, so you can check that. If you like the content of Illuminating Dialogues in this YouTube page, please take a time to like, subscribe and share this content so we can help bring more people on, share this content, and if you really like it, you can also support this work. In the description below there's some links as well, and that will help with editing and software as well for creating these podcasts. So thank you again and enjoy the rest of the podcast ahead. Hello everybody and welcome back to Illuminating Dialogues, where I have the pleasure of sitting down and talking to Virji, Dr. Preetam Singh today. How are you, Virji, and where are you coming from?
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you for having me on. I'm Dr. Preetam Singh, British Canadian. I've lived down south in Southampton, London way, but also lived in the northern parts of Ontario in Canada. But now I'm based in Anandpur Sahib in Punjab. I have been here for some time now. And, we're trying to start off this Mata Nanaki Khalsa Eco-Village or Dharamsala. So hopefully we can talk a bit about that and the motivations and how Sangat can help and get involved and support this.
Yeah, so for those people who are not familiar with Dr. Preetam Singh, I also give a short bio.
Please do.
So Dr. Preetam Singh is a British Canadian expert in natural health and lifestyle, Punjabi and Sikh heritage and traditional craft and ecological sustainability, and dedicating towards sustainable, organic, and spiritual community living since 2012 in Anandpur Sahib, Punjab. We didn't get a chance, unfortunately, to meet this year, but hopefully we will get a chance in person. But this, conversation, this dialogue is really to facilitate awareness of the Sangat, and hopefully we'll journey through the Khalsa Eco-Village, how you started this journey, what really is permaculture, the activities involved, the phases involved in the development of the Khalsa Eco-Village, your team, the different phases, and hopefully we can just go through that organically, and those who feel drawn to go deeper, we can also give them the details as well. So with that being said, I always ask this in my dialogues. My first question is normally, what lights you up?
For me, it's about being in Seva, right? I'm dedicated to just wanting to make the Guru happy, and that's my goal in life, really. And that lights me up is if I can do something that is for value to the Guru and the Sangat and for the future generations to come, then that lights me up. Another thing that lights me up is nature. These two things.
Wonderful. And I think just listening to in our phone conversation the whole journey you've been through, the sacrifices you've been through, I'm sure we'll also talk about this as well. That's inspiring for me to hear, and I think a lot of the people, the younger generation watching this as well. So if we could just start with what is the Khalsa Eco-Village? What is the vision for this? And how can people learn about supporting this and the Seva that you're doing?
Well, we'll come back to this, I'm sure, repeatedly through the conversation, in different aspects, because there's so much involved in, it's not just a Gurdwara, right? So the Gurus used to have something hundreds of years ago called the Dharamsala. And the Gurdwara, which we're all familiar with, the building, you've got the Prakash, you've got the Langar, you've got programs. That's a very colonial concept. The Gurdwara is actually a spiritual term. It's the meeting place of the Guru in your Dasam Dwar. The Dwar, it's a portal, it's a door where you meet the Guru in your Simran. The Dharamsala was a physical place, and first and foremost, an ecological, shall we say, nature reserve, to use a modern term, and a Pinda, a village, a Chakka, where Sangat actually physically lives there, and in community, serving the Guru and keeping all our traditions alive. That permanent settlement was what was the Guru's Dharamshala. It was an entirely organic lifestyle. We're talking about, the 1600s, early 1700 period. After that, it rapidly declined because of, the wars, and then empires, and then the British came along, and then we had genocide, and everything collapsed. So what we want to do is look, at the problems that we are facing as a community, and in Punjab and in the world. So we looked at that, many years, this is about 15 years ago, sitting with Sangat, saying, look, the world is not heading in a good place. We've lost a lot of our ancient culture. Where's it gone? Is this the way that we were meant to live in Kali Yuga? And the Gurdwaras were just offering the basic youth camps. Is that the limit of it? It didn't really scratch that itch, that, I had, and a lot of other people in my Sangat, were speaking privately to each other about, because it was still a taboo subject back then to say that, it's not enough, right? Because then you'll have the Granthi come at you with a stick saying, no, this is it, this is it, you're insulting us. But now there's a lot of people talking about it. But at that time, there wasn't a lot of shamanic influence or a lot of healing, and there is a lot of that now, and people are exploring deeper, albeit by different modes and different modalities, and finding other ways into our own actual roots, the way I see it. So this, I'm going at a bit of in an abstract way on purpose, because there's a lot of people out there who feel that, I hope feel that there's something missing from our society. And there is, because the Guru made us not as a faith or a religion. That's again a colonial concept. I've studied this. I've spoken to our elders in the community who are very old now, 80, 100 years old. And we were formed as an indigenous tribe of people with a unique culture, a unique identity, but albeit open to everyone from all directions to come and join. Those people who have not got the ancient sacred in their lives anymore could come to the Guru as Seva does first. And that's really important. I'll come back to that concept of Seva, because that's the underpinning of this eco-village is all about Seva. And the Guru's Dharamsala was all about Seva. People came and they bowed down and said, Guruji, we want to be your Sevak. And the Sikhs also used to refer to themselves as Sevak or Sevadar, not Sikh, just out of humility, right? And the Guru would say, my Sikh, my disciple. But it would be egoistic for a disciple to call himself a disciple of a Guru, because that implies that you are worthy of, one day being more than, a disciple. Because in that Guru relationship, the disciple becomes the Guru eventually. So the idea was of service, but also living a sacred life in harmony with Pavana Guru, Pani Pita, Mata Dhartama, our air, water, and Mother Earth. These are things that we all know that salok from Japji Sahib. It's there at the end of every prayer, but it has empty value today. It's just a philosophy at best. It's just a saying. Some people might want to apply it in their daily life, but it has no physical meaning. We're not connected with the land. We're disconnected from that natural life, and we're not connected to our ancestral life ways. So we've suffered as a community, as losing our culture, losing our physical identity as Punjabis as well. I've been speaking to a lot of Sangat, a lot of youth. They're struggling with their Punjabi. They might feel a bit embarrassed, but that they don't know it, and then they'll make excuses. And I was one of those people. Although my father was very fluent in Punjabi, unfortunately my mother tongue was English right from the start, and it was a huge process of having to learn. I taught myself how to read. I had to, go out of my way to spend time with Sangat so that I can learn. And now I can, I'm not 100% fluent, but I'm not too bad. I can now have a conversation with people in Punjab and pass off as a local, which to me is, it's a sign that, my father would be proud. So I think a lot of people, feel that, myself included, that culture has great value. And I'm a student of history, student of culture. And it's not just something, which is cool and ethnic, right? That we might say, yeah, our food, special occasions, we might dress up and, Kuriya might wear the salwar kameez and, and all that at weddings. But it's much more than that. It's very deep. Our culture is linked with spirituality. Everything that the Guru gave us, from morning to night, every tool that they used, everything that they did, the entire architecture that they lived in, the kind of houses they lived in, the kind of work they did, everything had a spiritual purpose. So spirituality, and when I speak about culture, I mean everything, like the clay houses we lived in, the kind of food we ate. And I want to talk about food later because that's really important. The kind of lifestyle we lived. We lived on the land. We lived with our hands in the soil, and we lived with the cycles of the seasons, and we lived with with the moon. We lived with the cycles of the sun and the moon and the seasons, and the monsoon, which is kind of really we're tailing at the tail end of the monsoon now. The monsoon was a very special period for our people. It was when we sat there under a thatched gazebo and just in a collective meditation whilst the rain fell. And that was like a 1 month meditation, just listening to water. We don't have that in our community anymore. And it's not just some abstract hippie concept or some historic thing that we can just say no longer relevant. It was the foundation of being a Sikh, was being connected to our culture, being connected to nature. And on top of that, you had what we still have, fortunately, is the Gurbani and the Kirtan. That was a way to spiritually ground. But life is more than just about the hymns and the chanting and the hit and that, right? That is a process. That is a structure, but it's a means to an end. Otherwise, we are just, students of life who are just remain students. It's like you go to uni and you do your degree. Obviously, you do your degree for the rest of your life, but at some point you got to graduate and apply that and work. Use that to your success for yourself, your family, your community. It's not just about I experienced this great peace and anand when I did my Simran. That's well and good. And that comes back to as well, who are we as people, as Sikhs, as human beings? The Guru made us for some purpose greater than just, the frivolities of the taste, which Gurmani says, the swad, we chuck something, we taste something, it's mitha, it's swad, and we enjoy that, and life comes, it goes, and it's finished. And, Gurbani teaches us that lesson, that this is not the real life. The real life is something else. And that was a spiritual, a deeply meaningful life that, where every physical aspect of life was also spiritual and connected. And that's what we want to, that's the basic foundation of what we want to bring back to Punjab and our community, is this deep spiritual connection with community, with the land, with our culture. So with that said, hopefully that's a good background of where we're coming from. Then what we want to do is build this physical location in Anandpur Sahib, Punjab, which is the birthplace of Khalsa. And we've got go ahead.
Go into,
so that was the philosophy of where we're coming from.
I think like for people like setting the scene and the background about why this is important, the culture, how we've been disconnected. It's not so obvious sometimes if you're sitting in the West, and it's not obvious, right? Unless you actually go to Punjab or you go there and you notice that. And before we maybe get into the specifics of how you would apply this philosophy and set up the Khalsa Eco-Village, maybe it could also be helpful to hear about your journey into how you've also noticed this shamanic understanding, or this nature-based understanding, or permaculture-based understanding being applied in other places, and then also that also give context how that would also play into the eco-village itself as well.
I mean, yeah, that's a good idea. I'll just quickly say what the eco-village is, just so that people then have that in their mind as I'm speaking about it. It's basically going to be 5 acres, and it's going to have our traditional ways of living, mitti, dekar, that is bungas, round mud huts, horses, cattle, organic farms, cultural activities, Shashtar Vidya, Akharkari, the horse riding, the writing Gurbani by hand, making everything very simple and rustic and connecting us to the ground. I'll come back to this, of course, but the inspiration for myself was very personal. It relates to how I actually came into Gurmat. I don't like to say Sikhi because that's a colonial term. I like to say Gurmat because that's, we give homage to the Guru rather than our own ego by saying Sikhi. It's about the Guru's teachings, not our personal journey. So, I was an atheist most of my life, although my father was a very spiritual man. He did his Amrit Vela. I come from a lineage, although I have not had the fortune to meet my great grandparents, but they were spiritual leaders in their time, well known leaders of Sikhs and Ayurveds and all of that. They ran pathshalas and all of that, but there was a lot of spirituality in my family, but my father never gave me any pressure to go either way. I've read the Bible, but I was an atheist. But my early childhood, I was very connected to Mother Earth, and I insisted that, I want to grow out my hair. So I did when I was, about 8-10 years old. I said, I refused to get my hair cut anymore. And I was a literal tree hugger, right? So trees next to the house, the council comes to prune it, I would protest, send them away, and it would create a mini scene in the community saying, who's this little kid trying to stop us from pruning trees? So I was the tree hugger. Eventually, I fell into, just because of peer pressure, and I fell into the whole capitalist charade of, you educate yourself and have a career. I fell into that and trimmed back my hair, and that made me really sad. But when I was living by myself after I graduated, I moved down from London to Southampton, and I used to be in the New Forest. It's a big national park. To those who don't know, there's wild ponies and big old trees. So I used to sit there. Later on, I would learn horseback riding over there as well. So it's a very special place for me. But just, something clicked in my mind, and, and I could not explain it with my scientific reasoning that I was trained with. I thought it's madness. It's, I explored all the philosophies of the world. I didn't know very much. I'd only maybe been to a Gurdwara a couple of times as a kid. I didn't really know very much. And my Punjabi wasn't so great either. And so I didn't have friends that I could speak to or elders that I could speak to. My father would go off at a very complicated spiritual tangent any time I spoke to him, which was off-putting because I was, a novice, but also egoistic, that I want to do things on my way and my terms. And here's this effectively Brahm Gyani speaking at a PhD level about Kali Yuga and meditation and Amrit Vela. I didn't know anything. So that went over my head, and I'm like, my dad's going off on one again. And so I wanted to find my own way. But eventually, I began to appreciate everything that he had, taught me. But it didn't make sense initially, but eventually it did. So it was all about nature. Nature brought me towards the Guru. So when I meditated, I had a darshan of the Guru, and everything suddenly became clear to me, and I, was already in the process again of, I grew out my hair again, and then I just suddenly became, very much in love with the Guru. The first time I heard the Simran, I had tears in my eyes. So it was very much a reawakening of something which, from past life, you can say. But nature is what was my way in. And so I've been very much involved, right from my spiritual journey has been involved with nature, with protecting nature, learning how we can live together in a better way. in the world, because we've got so many ecological challenges and health challenges as a result. And I have a background in public health, so that was one of the things as well, was health for me, because my training was to understand how to make sure that people don't fall sick, and why do people fall sick and how to prevent them from falling sick. So I'm not a medical doctor, but I have a PhD in public health. So we look at health at a big level. What are the trends? Why do people fall ill in the first place? How can we prevent that? So that was something that connected me again to the environment and our lifestyle, the way we live. And that's the leading cause of most illness today, is because of our lifestyle, and because we are living a very artificial life, full of chemicals, full of noise, full of machines and these kind of things, which affects our body at a physical level, mental level, spiritual level. So coming into Gurmat upgraded then my understanding, not just of the physical, but into the spiritual domain. So I had a spiritual experience, and I'll put it out there that, I had a darshan of the Guru and learned a little bit about, our ancient ways of living. I had it's like reminiscing of hundreds of years ago. Now I know it's because a past life and memories and these things are real. So I just became fascinated, and I just up sticks, left the UK, quit my job, sold my stuff, moved to India, Punjab, wanted to learn. And I moved to Anandpur Sahib. There's a French Sikh farmer who's an organic farmer, Preetam Singh. And I ended up staying with him, and he taught me organic farming. I went to South India, learned about permaculture there, the Aboriginal permaculture, before the term was coined in the West. They've been doing it for a long time. Then I learned about the Western methods of permaculture, which is basically, doing it in a more scientific way, in an ordered way. And what permaculture basically is permanent agriculture. That's the short phrase. I mean, that's the short form of the phrase. And basically what it means is looking at nature as more than just a machine, a factory. We are children of Mother Earth, and she provides. But if we have that wisdom and knowledge of how to live in harmony, and our ancestors have had this knowledge for thousands of years. Somebody comes in, and I think it was Gurmat Singh yesterday, and we were having that conversation about native tribes, and for them, the jungles are a garden, right? And they have over thousands of years carefully manicured that garden, but to the untrained eye, it's just a wild jungle. Right. And if you look at most farms, most gardens, they're very manicured, very laid out, very, very organized. And, that organization is a colonial way of controlling people's minds. And that's another conversation for another, an entire another conversation that we can go into some other time, and we must. But we were separated thousands of years ago, in some cases, hundreds of years ago, for native tribes. And I refer to the Gurus as a native tribe, because we had a pre-colonial culture. And that really matters. We'll come back to this theme, I'm sure, throughout this conversation. And for me, permaculture basically made sense because it was not just organic farming. It was about understanding that, you can plant trees, you can plant an orchard and then grow vegetables between the trees, and then companion planting. And then you don't have to actually do much because the leaves fall and become fertilizer, and the roots pick up water, and it becomes like a self-working system that you've just used ancestral knowledge to put in place, but nature's doing the work as it should. You're not actually coming in with tractors and pesticides and very much compost and all of that. It works itself. Ideally, this system needs much more land, 10 to 20 acres at least, to work, but you can do it on a smaller scale as well, which we are going to be doing. So permaculture is about a holistic way of living in harmony with the earth for our natural foods. And that links in with our health as well, because, you know, what we eat is our primary medicine, and that's how we can remain healthy. But the act of permaculture is a very spiritual act. I'm using the term permaculture. We can call it, in Punjabi, kudrati kheti, natural farming. That's another term which is also used.
Yeah, because people might not be familiar with what permaculture is. You also mentioned the difference between the South Indian permaculture and the scientific permaculture. So maybe like explaining, what that kind of is, and how
well, in the
people are seeing the effect
70s,
kind of now in the chemical farming.
definitely. In the 70s, there was, you know, an Australian chap, and he studied Aboriginal culture, and he said, look, they've been doing things, and there was a bit of cultural appropriation involved, and he came up with a book and called it Permaculture, which is basically a set of borrowed principles from different Aboriginal ways of living in harmony. And but even before that, in the 50s, there was a Japanese chap called Fukuoka, and he wrote a book called One Straw Revolution. That's been translated even into Punjabi. And he came up with a natural farming system, which again was partly based on his own experiments, but also ancient knowledge. But when I went to South India, for them, they said, well, we've been doing all this stuff for a long time. You know, for you, it's the latest innovation. But for us, we never went into the the chemical farming. We were always organic. We were always doing permaculture. We've always been having trees and growing with the trees, and growing a huge diverse range of foods. Not everyone will know about food. They haven't studied it, and that's a pity, because a lot of young people today don't know where their food comes from. And I'm talking about really young people, the current generation, youth, 5, 10, 12 years old. Some people don't know the names of vegetables, or, where they come from. They've not seen it as such, even though they come from a family, who has been, they're one or two generations removed from being farmers, and that's really a pity. But even in Punjabi farmers, unfortunately, because they've become so commercialized. And what happened was, India was a very desperately poor, overcrowded place when the British left. There was famine, and we were reliant on food aid. Millions of people would die every year from hunger. So the government at the time, they said, we want to launch a green revolution. They did it in Mexico. There was this communist chap who came to India, and he worked with the government to bring that here. But no one in India was ready to do this chemical farming and grow crops which were new. And that's where the modern wheat comes from. And then the whole the gluten issue and all that is because our modern varieties of food are unnatural and hybrid and GMO and all of that, so genetically modified. So what they did was, unfortunately, some people in Punjab, the farming community, they said, this is a great opportunity for us to make it financially, and because everyone was struggling, everyone was poor in Punjab, and they wanted to be successful. And they, the government spun it as, you'll be feeding the whole nation, which eventually it did do, but at the expense of the soil of Punjab. No other state in India was ready to sacrifice their water, sacrifice their soil, sacrifice their health. But unfortunately, and again, it's a product of a long period of colonization, because we sold out to the British long before we sold out to the Indian government. No, we effectively sold our land to the government, to their scheme of heavy, intensive chemical farming. And the British had already destroyed a lot of nature in Punjab because they wanted the timber, and they'd cleared a lot of land for farming anyway. But what this did is that it drained all the wetlands which were left. And so there's now hardly any wetlands left in Punjab, Chandigarh, the big city, the capital of Punjab, was built on what used to be the last remaining wetland of Punjab. And wetlands are basically like swampy areas, bogs, great habitat for birds and amphibians and other kinds of wildlife. It's not just trees and jungles which make up nature. So that's gone. And unfortunately, what this has left us with is cancer, right? Punjab has been declared to be the cancer capital of the world for almost 20 years running. It was unofficially the cancer capital of the world even before that, but it was officially declared in the late 90s. So it's been more than 25 years now. Cancer capital of the world, because all these chemicals went into the groundwater. You've got genetic abnormalities. So you got very high incidence of kids born with all kinds of mental health problems, mental disabilities, disfigurements, and autism, and all kinds of issues directly coming out from the way that we are disconnected from our ancient organic way of living. And there's huge politics in Punjab. I'm not going to go into that. That whole system has become political because there's a few group of elites who don't want their apple cart to be messed with. They've been very financially successful from this model. They don't care if water's going to run out. They don't care about the health effects on their children. They don't care about the environment. As long as they're going to earn profit, so they're happy with that. And that's the message sent out in Punjab in the mainstream is organic's difficult, it's hard, it's a conspiracy, it's the government trying to do it, it's not for us, it's an assault against farmers. And so the propaganda is spread in Punjab. And unfortunately, a lot of the educated in Punjab have now left, in the last 25, 30 years. Partly because of economic reasons, partly because of all the troubles after 1994, and so the educated have left, and the cousins left behind in the pind. They I don't want to call them slow, that would be unfair, but they're not aware. They haven't gained that awareness. But now what I've seen is that thode loki jaag rahe hain. Some people are awakening in Punjab as well. The young generation, people who have now, because if everyone's got a phone, everyone's seeing what other people are doing in the world. So that's really awakening people up, saying, is this really the way that we should be living? But that's gaining momentum, not as in big numbers as it should be. But there's big societies now coming up in some regions saying, let's take care of our rivers. And but what we want to do with permaculture is teach and educate the local people, Pindawale, at a grassroots level, dispel all the myths, dispel the rumors, and say, look, this is good for you, and it's good for the soil. Yeah, you're going to reduce your income in a couple of years because of the value of organic. It will pick up, but in the long term, it's really good for everyone. So we want to do that. And that's one of our long-term aims of this project, is by living an organic lifestyle and being open to teaching and welcoming local communities and speaking to them, face to face, and organizing awareness campaigns. We want to spread that message of health, but we want to connect our youth in other countries who've not had an opportunity to know much about food, to understand not just health from a Western perspective, because I'm educated in that Western health system, and it's lacking. Our ancestors didn't look at our meal and say how many carbs and how much protein and 20 grams of this, and they didn't even know what the word protein meant. They had an Ayurvedic perspective of health. They had an understanding that there is imbalance causes, and an imbalance in your life causes a health outcome or a health problem. It wasn't just a lack of a micronutrient. That's a very chemical, analytical, colonial way of looking at health. It's not holistic. So part of my journey was then dabbling into the Ayurveda in South India, and I have Ayurvedic, in my family. My great grandfather was a very well known Vad. My uncle's a Vad. I have a good friend who's in Canada. He's a Vad, and a couple of others as well. So I've gained knowledge traditionally, the way that it used to be done. And our gurus were Vads. They were very well known Vads. We know Sakis that the Mughal emperor came to them for medicine. Nobody else could cure that disease. So our health is something that's really important, and we want people from all around the world in our community to understand that, if how we live this organic lifestyle and how we grow our food is the same thing. It's all part of the same conversation, and we need to take interest in where our food comes from, and if it's organic or not, and how, if that's sustainable for the earth. And at a spiritual level, we have to talk about karams as well, because if we just take and say it doesn't really matter, well, we have to pay as a community, right? And the balance of the ledger, that balance of ledger is being kept. And the Guru teaches that in Gurbani, that we can pretend and as if nothing's happening, and for all intents and purposes we see that well, nothing really happens. We can use this plastic bag. What's the big deal? It's going to affect the environment, but we have to pay for that. And who's going to pay for it? Well, our children are going to pay for it, right? This karam is something which is it's a system which is unfair in a way, that you might do something, but your kids will pay for it. And that's something that native people know. And I'll give you an example of an Anishinaabe tribe that I worked very closely with when I was in Canada. They, and the Lakota tribe as well, they talk about any action that they do. They say, let's think about 7 generations ahead, right? What is going to be the impact that I'm doing today on that 7th generation? How will they be impacted? Yeah, well and good. I'm going to live any old life I do today. And some people have that view, saying, how does it matter, right? Khao, piyo, ash karo. Just enjoy yourself, eat, be merry. But our children are going to pay, and they are going to, we know that now, that climate change is an issue, but plastics, microplastics is an even greater issue than that. Water being contaminated is an even bigger issue than either of these things. So we really need to focus on our Mother Earth, because she is effectively Rabb. She is our Paramatma in this world. The God is not just what they call Nirguna, far away, but Sargun, manifest here on earth as well. People forget about that Sargun aspect of God. They think about, okay, we do Amrit Vela and God is effectively Christian God far away in the clouds, a man with a beard, maybe, sitting in heaven. They've called it, now the people compare Sachkhand with the Christian heaven, right? So somebody's died, he's gone to Sachkhand. That doesn't really work like that, in my view. So we need to understand that we live a very interconnected life. The harmony has broken, but we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to wander and go to different tribes and try and find out their shamanic teachings, because we have our own. And unfortunately, that teachings a lot of them have been lost, but not entirely, because a lot of our culture still exists.
Okay. And that might not
Go
be
ahead.
clear to a lot of people, that we don't have to wander to these shamanic tribes to understand that connection to earth. So if you could maybe expand upon what are those effectively shamanic teachings, well, cultural aspects within our own tradition, and maybe we can also start with, what is a Dharamsala?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to link it in. So, I always enjoy every organic conversation. I never know what's going to come up. So I didn't know today we're going to be talking about shamanic teachings and this and that. But, I love the way that, we can link something meaningful in our lives and provide context to others so that they can see that it has some value to their own lives. And I hope that, you know, people watching this can join the dots and say that makes sense. I went there and I did that. I had that, you know, experience, and I tried that medicine, and I went to South America, or, you know, and I tried the drums, and I attended this Reiki workshop, and whatever it is. But we have our own way, which is as good as any medicine offered by any other shamanic offering out there. And, you know, the Guru's basic philosophy was not just about the exotic aspect of it. Because if you look at these retreats and things, what they do is that they, very much like Western medicine, people go there once they have a problem, right? Once they're stressed, they already have addictions, they already have crises, then they end up at these retreats, and then they end up, there's going to be exceptions. Some people like to say that in the yoga community in America, they lead healthy lives to begin with, but then they're the teachers. Their students are the broken people who turn up from society, who need their help after the deed has been done. So the Guru is focused on, you know, a lifestyle which was spiritual and healthy and holistic to begin with. So, you know, if I run you through, and we've written about this, we've got a website called gurmatkhalsa.org, and there's a chapter there on the history of the Dharamsala, the lifestyle of how it used to be, and I'll share that link with you again later, so you can put that on the caption. But we've described, and we've created some artwork as there, and we've described the daily routine of people. And people would wake up, as you know, in the Amrit Vela, and meditate together quietly before the sunrise. Fortunately, we haven't lost that. But what we have lost is that meditation doesn't end through the day with your Amrit Vela. That energy winds up. It's about living with the cycles of the energy. So we wind up our energy during the day, and then we cycle that energy into everything that we do. And the Guru's way of living in holistic balance was very much linked to our social behavior. And that might be a bit strange for someone who's not, you know, hasn't looked into it in that way. But it's obvious if you think about it, if you want to join the dots, that Gurbani talks about and puts a lot of emphasis on Panjachor, Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Mohankar, you know, and our Panjagun, Satya, Daya, Santok, Nimrata, Pyar, that's truth, Satya, Daya, compassion, Santok, contentment, Satya, Daya, Santok, Nimrata, humility, and universal love. These things are not just principles, right? We carry that energy through our day, and the Gurus made a system. They said that you should live a very humble life without very much of the material need. What humbleness does is that it helps us keep away from those chores which drain our spiritual energy and which effectively, you know, make us do things which are not for our own health benefit, or, you know, for benefit of Mother Earth. It's just to fulfill some greed or passion or something or the other. So the Guru said, you want come to me, and as a humble student, as a sevak, as a sevadar, and your job is just going to be Hanji, Satbachanji, tell me where to do the mopping and cleaning and picking and caring of the horses. And so the Gurus healed people through humbleness. And I've got an entire chapter on this book that we've published, Gurmat Khalsa, dedicated to humbleness. There's something we need to understand, is that our lifestyle was humble. And why I'm putting emphasis on that is, in the modern Western perspective, we look back and we see that they were uncivilized, uneducated, they didn't know much about the world. They were just pendu. They were, shall we say, stupid, right? Like rednecks, just uncultured, uneducated, but actually they were very wise. Because it takes great spiritual wisdom to realize and conquer the ego and let go of the material. And if you speak to, people who have got to that point, if they've spent their entire lives meditating, and, they say that, breaking the ego is a huge, difficult thing. Not having those wants and desires anymore, other than to be of service, is what Gurbani tells us. Gurbani is saying that, our only desire is to be of service to Sadhguru, to paraphrase. So to get to that point is something which we are spending our entire lives doing, but in our communities, because we live such a simplified life, hanji hanji, tell us how to serve, we were living an enlightened life. And that's really important for us, to sink in. If you just think about it and pause and think about it and say, our lives are so fast now, so complicated, stressful. We're thinking about money, relationship problems, debt, and, all kinds of crises in our lives. Our mind is going very fast. We're always on the phone. We're looking at reels. We're over calculating. To be successful in the commercial world, you have to be a bit sly and clever, and maybe even cheat people sometimes, be a bit unethical, to be successful, and that's unfortunate. But what I want to put out there and say is that our ancestors lived a very different way. And it's not something that, we should say was bad. We need to have great pride in our ancestors. And that's one of the differences, unfortunately, between our community and other native indigenous communities, is that even though they have maybe colonized as well, like a lot of tribes in the US, they're wearing modern clothes and they drive pickup trucks, but at the same time, they have great pride in the way their ancestors lived. And they believe that they were removed from that life, and they yearn that hopefully our children can experience and go back to that original way. Unfortunately, I think in our communities today, because we've bought into that message of self-hate, that our ancestors were poor and miserable, and that was a pathetic, backward, uncivilized life, and who wants to live in a mud hut anymore? And that when I go around Punjab and I speak to people, I spoke to a great leader, and what he said to me, this is back in 2013, 14, he said, and I wasn't using a mobile phone because I wanted to detox from that whole thing. I quit mobile phone for 10 years almost. And he said to me, get yourself a phone. You need to get with the times. You're living in the dark ages. And I said, but the gurus lived like this. And he used the phrase, oh, bichare guruan gareeb sige. If you translate that into English, it's really sad. What he said was, those wretched, pathetic gurus, they were poor and uncivilized. You can't say that. They weren't uncivilized and poor and backwards. He's telling me to get with the times, but he agreed with me that yes, this is how our gurus lived in mud huts, for sure. They did organic farming, for sure. And then he made the wild claim. He said, if the guru was here today, he would also be on his mobile phone. Like, I would doubt that very much. Right. So.
And also we've, just for context as well, the audience with Dr. Kamarup Singh, we've also been through the agenda and linking to technology. So hopefully the audience will also have the understanding behind, the so-called modern technology, but the actually agenda behind that as well.
There is an agenda behind everything, right? So, and the word agenda can be used both ways.
Sure.
So, because there's a matter of semantics. If something has a negative force behind it, it's an agenda. But if something has a positive force behind it, it's a vision. So the gurus had a vision. Everything for us was designed with a spiritual vision, right? But everything that the colonists have given us has an agenda. That's also designed, but in a bad way, to bring us down. The guru's agenda or vision was to bring us up, to raise our energy, to make us live a good life, not just as individuals, but as a community, and to help Mother Earth, because our survival depends on that. And just to maybe reference, because you've been having conversations with Dr. Kamaroop Singh ji as well, it might have come up, but we've, many of the Granths and our oral knowledge talk about the prophecy of the Khalsa. And this is something which a lot of people are now talking about. And I want to raise some awareness of this, because again, this feeds into why we're doing this project. And I think there's a general consensus even outside of our community, people who are looking at the disasters in the world and seeing and awakening to the fact that this agenda, there is an agenda, there is an elite cabal of people, and there are people pulling strings, and politicians are puppets, and what we see isn't really the truth, and all of that. That's all true. And the gurus have forewarned us about that hundreds of years ago. So there was a Baba Harnam Singh who's published a book called Sikh in Here, and it's available in an English translation as well for free at many locations. If you ever go to an event, pick it up. So it's mostly a biography of him, but he found an old manuscript written by Guru Gobind Singh Ji with hukumnamas. And one of the hukumnama written there, it says, Marti da tel jo jalaye, Marti da tel usi ko jalaye. Because Guru Gobind Singh Ji wrote in Brij Bhasha, which is closer to Hindi Urdu than is Punjabi in many of his writings. So what that means is Marti da tel means crude oil. If you burn crude oil, you will be burnt in its wake. And crude oil would not be burnt for another 250 years after this was written. Because oil was only distilled by a Canadian Scottish engineer in 1865 or 1870. Before that, it was just a bitumen's for, if some people would use it to waterproof their roofs, and that's it. It had no use. But Gurus warned, don't burn this. This oil is going to come. Don't burn it. And in India today, the colloquial village term for petrol or kerosene or oil is mitti da tel, because mitti da tel means oil which comes out from the earth, the sand, crude oil. So the Gurus warned us about many things. The Gurus have given us 52 hukamname, 52 hukamname, which albeit is not fully authentic. It was a product of a Gursikh in the 70s in the UK who published a newsletter saying, I've collated 52 Bavan hukamname. And a lot of people have just assumed that this is what the Guru did. But he had researched and put together a collection from different sources about the Guru's hukamname. There's no authentic Bavan hukamname as such. But there were a lot of Purataan hukamname, definitely in the hundreds, not just 52. But he researched and found from different sources and different texts about the hukams that we were given. And that includes horse riding. That includes having to live on the land. And once I spoke to a very, a spiritual santa, and I asked him, Babaji, if we were to follow all of the Guru's hukams and everything on Gurbani, what will our life look like today? He thought about it and he said, in Punjabi, I'll translate, he said, if we were to just follow everything the Guru has told us to do, we have to quit this modern life. We have to quit jobs. We have to just live in community. We have to have one langar. We have to live organically. We have to grow our own food. We have to live in mud huts. We have to. All the things that the Gurus have given us, right? He said that he applied his mind and said, if actually we were to obey the hukum of the Gurus and obey what Gurbani is asking us, then we have to live a different way. So I think we need to, at some point, if we want to be spiritually honest as Sikhs, we need to look at Gurbani and say, are we actually being honest Sikhs and being the best that we can for the Guru's perspective, and thinking long term. If not ourselves, put the structures in place so our children can lead the life that our Gurus gave us. No matter how hard that might be, We have to put those building blocks in place today, because the Khalsa prophecy, circling back to that, is if we don't, and we're heading in that direction now, nuclear war, what's happening in Palestine is all just an experiment of what they want to do on a wider scale. They're seeing what can we get away with, how can we starve people, how can we destroy, and they're going to replicate that on a big scale. They're not going to stop with Palestine. So Khalsa prophecy tells us, just to finish that point, that the world will experience a very hard time where technology fails, there's war, and only those people will succeed who live effectively, using modern terms, off-grid, growing food, self-sufficient in community. Those people are the ones who are going to succeed, and a lot of people in the West have already understood that message. But the Gurus told us this a long time ago.
Yeah, that's thank you for explaining all of the background and context, because a lot of people, they might not be from the Gurmat background, let's say, or even Punjabi diaspora.
Yeah.
A lot of Western, English, Welsh, Scottish, Irish
Of
people
course.
do already understand this, and they're starting to come off grid. They're starting to grow their own vegetables. But now
Yes.
this is actually linking to our own lineage and our own background, which
That's
is
right.
coming full circle.
It's coming full circle. And people have been, anyone, I guarantee anyone who just looks objectively at the world will know that the world is not healthy, and we're heading towards crises. And people have been preparing. Out in the US, they've been digging bunkers, and people have been quitting jobs and buying land and living off grid, and there's a whole prepper kind of movement been going on there for decades. But we've been a bit slow to the game because, of the whole colonial experience, which I'm sure you have explored with Dr. Kamarup Singh. I'm not going to go into that in too much detail because you've already done that. But, we need to get out of that colonial mentality of the colonized, and we need to get rid of the self-hate that they have given us, and we need to embrace our culture with pride. And I don't just mean doing Bhangra at a wedding. That's not what I mean by culture. For a lot of people, unfortunately, that is the limit of culture, is the desi food, maybe a bit of Bhangra, maybe an event on a special occasion, a cultural event. That's interesting. That goes more into the folk culture, which is also important. And that's also going to be an important part of our programs at the village, because folk culture connects us to the land, and that's something which we need to bring back as well.
Yeah, that was one of my questions actually. So, like, when I was reading through, which I'll also share in the description below, the PDF, is like the concept of a Dharamsala, the concept of a bunga, and then you also wrote activities such as folk song and dance, traditional herbal medicine, Gurbani calligraphy, musical instruments. I know we've had just recorded Rabab on talking about those Purataan instruments, Shashtar, Vidya, Horsemanship. So if we maybe dive into the concept of a Dharamsala, an eco-village, kind of what do you envisage this space to be encompassing, and why are all these activities need to be there? Because it might not be so obvious for people why folk and song and dance are important, why Gurbani calligraphy is important. So if you could help us connect to the vision and ground us into that village.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Deji. That's a really good way to link into what this is all about. So, a Dharamshala is first and foremost, and I'm giving you the Guru's definition from how they see it, is a nature reserve and a spiritual community open to all. And I mean all. I mean everyone in all four directions. You could consider yourself to be Irish, French, American, white, black, African. It's for you if you don't have in your ready ancestry or recent ancestry another way back in. Because if you do, I would suggest you explore that first. But if you don't, you've been colonized for a long time. There's no way back in. The Guru is giving you that spiritual access to sacred spiritual truths, physical truths. And I'm placing that emphasis on both. Spiritual and physical go hand in hand. You cannot have spirituality without the body and without the body Khalsa, that is the community. There's spirituality, otherwise it's just a theory on a piece of paper, right? It's something intangible. For spirituality to manifest, it happens through our body. We are spiritual beings and organs to experience and express. And maybe that's something which I'll come back to later if you remind me, that spirituality is not just an internal feeling, it's an expression, a manifestation. So a Dharamshala is a nature reserve, a community, and historically, there was only ever a Dharamshalas. There were hundreds of acres, sometimes thousands of acres of wilderness, and Punjab was wilderness in the past. Jungle Book, literally lions, tigers, streams. So big wilderness with little settlements. We can imagine some kind of ancient Scottish settlement or an ancient Native American village, But for our village, it was replace the teepees with round mud clay houses. Otherwise, that kind of atmosphere of community rising and working together, kids helping their mums and aunties, children running around barefoot, and everyone running around barefoot, and engaged in village life, traditional village life, which you might have seen in films, documentaries of native peoples, or historic documentaries of any culture. So a Dharamshala is basically a traditional village with ethnic and spiritual culture, and living with the common purpose of serving the Guru and to serve the world, because Sarbat Dabala, we have to serve the world through our actions as well, not just our own personal friends and family. So this is literally a place of, what we are going to have, to put it in real terms, is 5 acres of land where we have the pind, the village, hut settlements, and that will be a working museum where we want to demonstrate and show people that, okay, this is how people actually lived. So period clothing, which is humorous because I'm wearing the barna. For me, this is not period clothing. This is the only clothing I have. So, but for somebody from another culture, it would be a period reenactment. So, a period reenactment, if you want to call it that, but for the people doing the reenactment, it's real. To show people that this is how the Gurus lived, and a living cultural museum with all the kind of tools of the trade. So that might be, the charkha. And I spin cotton, I learned that. Maybe a lot of people don't know these things anymore. And that's the whole point, is to bring these things back and understand the value. And I'll talk about some of these technologies, because they're really important. But the Dharamshala is that village. It's going to be the organic permaculture, which feeds into the langar and provides us with the medicines, the wild herbal medicines, which grow over there as well in abundance. We will also, and this is right next to a running mountain stream. We'll have that lifestyle over there for the people, a few people living on the site, because it's going to be run by local sevadars, local families, and an educational center. So we want to have camps where we welcome Sangat to come and camp there, learn. Kids can learn, but adults can learn as well, not just kids camps. And regarding these activities, why is it that these cultural activities or spiritual activities are so important? Again, as I said before, the Guru has a spiritual vision for everything that they gave us, And what they did was, when they made the identity for us as Akali, which is even before the Khalsa was created, the Khalsa was more of a formation of a formal army with a mission. But the Gurus have been having the Dharamshalas and Sangat and Sikhs were having Amrit for hundreds of years before that, from time of Guru Nanak. Excuse me. So the community has always been there, and they live together, sharing in the principles that the Guru said was that we need to live in harmony with Mother Earth. And they restored and brought back all the ancient Aboriginal tools and ways of living of Punjab. And when they established Dharamsalas outside of Punjab, they would bring back their regional geographical tools. So if there were to be a Dharamsala in Scotland tomorrow, it would be in that, bringing back the ways that the ancient Scottish used to live on the land. And, and by all means, wearing the kilts and using the natural dyes, living off the land that, because that's the ancestry of that region. And that ancestry is not just from how Western historians see it, that people just happened to develop over time. It was given to them, right? It was given to them by the Creator, that this is how life exists for you. And that's why Native people who still honor those ways, they know that those teachings came from far away. What we say is Turki Bani, right? Came from far away. It came from that same sacred source. All Native people were told, this is your region. And my research also suggests that our ancestors, the Gurus had even brought back more of the ancient dialects which have been lost now. We're left with Punjabi, even that's being lost now. Tet Punjabi, colloquial Punjabi, that's being lost. So these activities, be it, the easy thing to explain to people who might know is Gurbani calligraphy. That's an easier one. Our ancestors had Guru Granth Sahib Ji handwritten. And how can you print a Guru Granth Sahib Ji on paper? It doesn't have the spiritual value. Once you read it out, Gurbani is Gurbani once you sing it. But that I don't want to offend anyone. But unfortunately, there's plenty of people now, even in the religious world of Sikhi, who've understood this. So it's no longer a controversy for me to say that the Maharaj Dabir on printed paper is not actually Guru Granth Sahib Ji. I can say this because now there's plenty of people in the mainstream saying this. But we need to bring back the handwritten Swarup, because that is the real manifestation of the Guru. That energy, if you've ever had the opportunity to go to Hajur Sahib, because they still have Prakash, you'll feel the special energy that you've not felt elsewhere with the same Prakash of Guruji. It's like Guru Gobind Singh Ji is sitting there. You feel elevated. You feel humbled. When you do the part from the handwritten scripture, I don't want to call it scripture, but handwritten Guru Granth Sahib Ji, because in a modern printing, they put spaces between the words, and that leads to corruption as well. The original manuscripts also have minor differences in the Gurbani, which I'm sure Dr. Kamarup Singh can explore in detail with you some other time. There were additional Banis as well, which they then standardized, removed, and they Christianized it into a Christian Bible, right? And people say, daily Hukamnama came from page so-and-so, but there were never page numbers. It all depended on the size of the handwriting. You could have a Guru Granth Sahib Ji with 100 angs or 1,000 angs. It was just the size of handwriting. They used pagination because the printer in Ludhiana could only fit so many words on a page, and they ended up with 1430. And since then, it's been standardized. They removed a lot of the Gurbani. They standardized a lot of it because there were differences. And but they did it from their own colonial perspective. And then there were all those Western scholars, which I'm sure Kamarup Singh has talked about, McLeod and Trump and all of those people with their agendas. And they were the ones heavily involved in this movement of so-called Tat Khalsa movement, as opposed to the Sanatan movement. And I'm not part of either movement, because the way I like to see it is that the Guru's movement was an Aboriginal movement, much older than any of these competing cultures, be it Sanatan culture, and we have a link with Sanatan, yes, but our roots go back longer than that, deeper than that, tens of thousands of years older than any of the modern cultures in India or the world. So Everything we do is spiritual. We need to have this calligraphy, but we need to have, and the gurus have told us the value of being physically fit and strong, internally and externally. And that's why we have the akhara. An akhara is like a dojo. And that's where you learn the martial arts, you learn your physical fitness. That was set up by, Guru Angad Dev Ji. He came up with this daily akhara. And the Nihang Singh still have their akhara. So we're going to be working with some of the leaders in the Shastra Vidya world to bring us that training of the ancient ways of doing things, not just Gatka. Gatka is a performance art today, which is great. It's a sacred dance form, but it's not a martial art form. Both are good. Maybe then that links to the folk dance. Gatka is effectively a folk dance. It's a performance art.
So could you explain maybe the difference? Because that might not be clear for some people, because it may be polarized towards maybe anti-folk dance, or they
I understand.
might be on the Gatka route and not understand Shastra Vidya.
Yeah.
So perhaps,
well, which is, I'll it's very interesting.
Because I know the folk dance has shamanistic, animalistic elements of the land.
It has
seen like the eagle, the snake, which is also present in Guru Gobind Singh's writing. So if you could help people there as well.
So basically, folk dance is not anti-Gurmat. In fact, it is an integral part of our sacred prayer. And indigenous elders around the world will tell you that their dance is prayer. We're not talking about vulgar modern dances where you're, shaking body parts or doing it for the purpose of exhilaration or lust. That is different. None of the Western dances modern Western dances are sacred. The way that Bhangra is unfortunately done today in the popular sense, in the pop culture, is not even traditional, right? There are many other folk dances in Punjab, like people might only know Bhangra and Gidda, but there are many others, right? There's 3 or 4 others. I forget the names now, but I can share that later. They still exist in Pakistan side Punjab. Even being Muslim, and I'll come back to this point, they still actually do folk dance. So what dance is that our body is memory, and our body contains spiritual organs, not just in a dasam dwar, not just chakras, which people might have heard of, but all throughout our body, different. And that's how yoga works in a manner as well. When we engage our body in different ways, we are invoking the ancient spirit of our ancestors, and who gave us these ways of honoring. And a lot of these dances are honoring our ancient ways of, our ancient ancestors, therefore our gurus, and honoring Mother Earth, and honoring the gifts that they gave us. It's these 3 things that they're honoring. Bhangra is a folk dance from the Jat community. It honors the sacred planting and harvest cycle of the wheat and the sowing and all of that. The gurus focused on the more tribal aspects of these things. So the ego is really important to us. And we've got a painting that we put on the Gurmat Khalsa website and in the Dharamsala chapter, where a good artist, youth, he's a really good artist, Preetam Singh in Himachal, and shout out to him because, he can do art commissions. I want to put his name out there. He, came up with artwork which shows some of our tribal customs and dance. So during that dance, and people may not like this, and I'll challenge that presumption of why this is ours and why it's because of the colonial, spiel that has been sold to us, that this is pagan or not ours or Hindu or what have you. I'll come back to that. But just to paint a picture, imagine that you have the Nagara. Nagara is a big round drum that Nihang Singh still have today, big deep drum. And imagine that a row of men having a warrior dance, and they're beating their akhara and they're stamping up and down. And what they're doing is that they're mimicking the bears, right? The movement of the bears, because they're the big animals in Punjab, or used to be. And then you will have some people who are mimicking the movement of the lion and the tiger in their dance form. Let's not forget our name is Singa. We are named after an animal spirit. You know, we were given that name as a totem. And I'm not trying to apply Aboriginal teachings onto us. I'm trying to say that we have it. And I'm using these terminologies because people would have heard these terminologies in the West of the word totem, a totem animal, totem spirit. Our totem spirit was the lion. I say was because the last lion was unfortunately killed in 1923 in Punjab, in Panipat. So we honored these spirits of animals as sacred elder relatives and beings who gave us their, you know, their wisdom and let us live, because they were the king of the jungle, and Punjab was a big jungle. You know, today some people might have seen pictures of Buddhist monks sitting next to tigers in meditation, but people don't know the stories of Baba Buddha Ji. Baba Buddha Ji lived in the middle of the jungle surrounded by wild animals. And this is the story is even said in the Gurdwaras, but people kind of gloss over it when they're talking about that little phase of the story of the Saki of Baba Buddha Ji. He lived on purpose in the jungle because he was the shaman of our people. It was his job to collect and maintain that repository of wisdom for all the gurus going forward. And he lived for 140 years. And then there was a Baba Buddha Ji disciple who carried that tradition on as well. So the gurus have lived in a very animist way. You might want to call it a pagan way. And that was their identity. Unfortunately, what happened with the Singh Sabha movement was a reaction against the Sanatan Sikh movement. So they tried to erase anything that, in their view, was deemed to be pagan or Hindu. And they got rid of the havan, or the home, which is the fire, which is a great pity, because you can't have, it's the fourth element. You cannot complete any spiritual action or prayer without the home. It's a fire. Fire is something that brings light to the universe. It gives us fire. It gives us energy. So a sacred dance honors that fire. There was always a fire burning there. So the men would be dancing separately. The women would be doing their own thing separately, not together, because there is humility. There is understanding of respect. It's not a vulgar dance. This is not a dance for passion, lust. Men and women are not together in that dance. Sometimes when men and women's dance is a separate thing, they do separately. Women might just do their own thing, just a woman's dance, and that also exists. And some of these dances still exist in Pakistan side, even though they might be Muslims who are against any of this kind of stuff. But they're simple village folk, and they're just happy with their simple lives and traditions. They still have mud houses. They still do their folk dances. Men do it differently. Women do it separately. That's the only thing. They don't do it together. So, and the dress as well. Our dress that we wear today is not the kind of Western clothing is, forget Western clothing. Even, the kurta pajama, that's also not our clothing. I'll come to that. The tribal dress that the gurus gave us during ceremony was different. We would just have a kashera, a gatra. We would be having peacock feathers and eagle feathers in our hair, depending upon the seniority. The drums, as I described, but the gatras were very colorful, hand woven. Like you might have seen Nepalese or Bhutanese kind of very multicolored hand woven artwork or that kind of thing. Somebody might have seen that kind of artwork. Even from other cultures like Hawaii or others, multicolored art. We had that. And that has spiritual meaning. And that's a whole discussion we can do another time. That, the kind of clothes that we wore during ceremony reflected our interaction with the earth. Like the dyes of the natural dyes for used in Scotland still today to make the traditional the wool fabric comes from the mosses. It comes from the earth. It reflects the colors around you. It reflects the earths around you. We had bright yellows, bright reds, bright blues. These were our colors spiritually important to us. And blue was such an important color. And I want to talk about blue, so remind me. So our dance form was sacred. This is not something that, this is now just left in the historical texts. On our side of Indian side of Punjab, but the Pakistani side of Punjab, you still actually have people who are, they're now Musulman tribals, right? They call themselves Muslim tribes, right? They're in the northwest frontier provinces, and they still have the colorful beadings and patterns and things, and a lot of them were converted from Sikhs to Muslim during partition. So they were Sikhs before that. But they're carrying on these traditions because nobody really cares over there. And it's not such a developed country. They're still maybe 30, 40 years behind the trend of Punjab East. So they're still carrying on with their traditions and cultures, which the gurus brought back, right? Because these are tribal cultures. They're not even folk culture, because folk culture comes from the Aryan culture, from the Hindu culture. So let's say the Jat community, they've got the Bhangra dance. That's Punjabi culture, nothing wrong with it, but it's nothing really got to do with the Sikhs as such, right? If you want to celebrate that, that's fine. But the gurus did not grow wheat in big agricultural fields because they did permaculture with the trees. And that model of farming is a colonial model of farming, which we don't celebrate because we celebrate growing in trees. We celebrate different things. The gurus didn't actually eat wheat. They ate millet grain. And I want to talk about food and the way that in our entire diets have been colonized. Everything we think is Punjabi food is not actually Punjabi food.
Wow, that would be super good. Maybe before we go into the color and diet, we could just touch on the elements of that you're going to be putting in as teaching the musical instruments.
I'll come to that.
The Shashtar Vidya as well, just so we touch on the different aspects that you're.
Yeah, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do want to cover these aspects, but I don't want to have it going on. We can do a part 2 to this as well. If if there's popular interest saying, tell us more about this aspect, you can ask your viewers saying, is there something that you want to have a more detailed discussion on? I'm happy to go into deep dive on any of these topics discussed today. So just to finish off the dance, there was a big conspiracy that this is pagan, it's not ours. And in Punjab, even if you want to say, I want to bow down and worship a tree, they'll call you a pagan. If you want to say, I want to honor the water, they'll call you a pagan. There's many things I do have to do. I used to do when I was out in England. Nobody would bat an eyelid. They'll be like, he's doing his thing, right? If I would do a shamanic hand drum, you beat that in Punjab, people look at you as if you're some crazy pagan guy. Not ours, not Khalsa. It's you're strange. So this whole Dharamsala is not going to instantly bring all these things back. This is going to be something which will take a long time for community and social acceptance, right? Locally, we don't suddenly offend people. You have to slowly encourage and change people's minds. But that's not going to stop us from demonstrating. And that's the whole point of, having this cultural museum. And other communities in the world, like many Native Americans, even the Welsh, even, people in the Scandinavian countries, they have regular working cultural museums where they demonstrate their arts and crafts and lifestyle. They do reenactments. They show their ceremonies. Very popular amongst people who claim Viking ancestry. They like to build their, even learn how to make hand-forged iron tools, and people dress up and maybe they will make a dugout canoe and go on a long tour. We used to do these things. We used to have rivers and streams that we used to canoe on. And we were talking about this with Balraj Singh yesterday. And we were wishing that one day we could bring rivers back to Punjab so we can go back on a canoe, So The dance was something that we want to demonstrate, and we will do so, which is with cultural sensitivity involved, with a little bit of education of the public beforehand. But we want to educate people, maybe also through artwork, because there's going to be an art gallery on this site, a permanent art gallery. And we want to show, because that's one way to desensitize people, is show them the art, show them people that, the visions of the past, that people can become desensitized and say, yes, more culturally accepting, saying, okay, this is something good, and now we're ready to show us, put on the performance. Let's see what it looks like. We want to bring back, and one thing I want to mention, because it's really important, because I've been saying it throughout, that everything the Guru has given us is spiritual importance. This is a sacred offering. When we do our part, we are doing a sacred offering to the Guru. And I think everyone will agree with that. No one's going to be against Gurbani as a Sikh, because that's your identity. But this is also a spiritual offering, because spirituality has to manifest physically. You do the part, it's words, it's shabad. It happens at a vibrational level for sure, but it's not physically manifesting. We have to physically express our spirituality. And one of those ways of doing it is through these art forms. And I'm using the term art forms because it's a translation from the Punjabi kala. Kala means an art form. A person who's a performer or an artist is a kalakar, an artist. So it's the art form. It's not a dance, it's an art form. That's how we use it in our language, kala. It's an art form. So this art form is a sacred offering. For example, we want to offer a sacred offering to heal nature, to heal the balances of energies in the earth. So our tribal elders might perform a little bit of a ceremony around a fire with a little bit of a dance, a sacred dance. The dance may only involve a few movements, maybe mimicking animals, maybe doing something. I'm not going to go into detail today about that. We can talk about some other time. It's also a sensitive topic. So it's a sacred offering, but not just this. I need to plug in a charger. So hold on. You might lose my face. I'm balancing, funnily enough, this phone on a balm. A balm means one of those traditional clay vessels where you have a jar. So just, to show your audience, there is a balm over here with pickle, mango pickle. Cool. I'm happening to balance this on just as a coincidence, talking about culture. So art form includes musical instruments, right? And our traditional instruments were very sacred. Let's go right back to the original rabab. There are very few rababis left in the world today. And the taus, the saranda, the dilruba is now coming back. But before that, there was even the sitar, even the flute was very commonplace, which is unfortunately doesn't find much prevalence in Kirtan today, right? You might have a few Singhs who have learnt it separately outside of, the Sikh environment and brought it back in. I know there is a couple of Singhs, there's maybe a Taragar Singh, there's a few people who are experts in the flute and the ragas. But we had all these instruments as well. And what this does, again, if you play music, it is an expression of spirituality, right? Just as equally as the dance form is an expression, a physical expression, this is also a physical expression, okay? Which is why traditionally Rag Kirtan was done slowly with one Shabad, not like in a mega Kirtan program today where everyone is ready for the next, and we have 2 hours of 20, 50 Shabads. There would be one Shabad. This is known as Drupad Rag. I believe there's an English Sikh who is, I forget his name, it might be Kirit Singh, who has learnt Drupad Rag from the ustads, from the ragis. And Drupad Rag basically means that you set the mood and atmosphere through instrumental music for at least half an hour, 45 minutes, with all the different musics. And what that does is there's a science behind the ragas, which is being brought back by there's a Professor Raj and the Raj Academy and many other people who have gone into depth on these things. And they've been doing a great job to bring back our instruments. But Drupad Rag is still rare today. It is singing in a very, meaningful way, not a quick shabad. And somebody is interested, go onto YouTube, listen to some Drupad Rag, and you'll find that it's slow. One shabad will be stretched on for the next 10 minutes because the Guru wants quality over quantity. They want us to connect with that one shabad. That's why the Gurbani is divided into ragas to begin with, because every rag has a context to it, right? A spiritual context. If it's Basant, it's for the spring season. And that it shows us that the Gurus lived by seasons, to people who argue that that's pagan.
And I think for people who are wanting to connect deeper, we've had Professor Surinder saying Jaswil Kaur in previous episodes, so they can maybe
that's wonderful.
Dive into that as well. So in terms of the horsemanship or Shastra Vidya,
that is really important as well.
That's also important for people to.
Shastra Vidya connects us to Guru Gobind Singh Ji, right? I think that's something which now a lot of people, I don't even need to explain why it's important. A lot of people have got it. They've been getting into, for at least my knowledge, I'm almost 40. Since I was young and I started coming into Gurmat and attending Gurdwaras, there've been, people have been in the Gurdwaras doing Gatka and youth camps from the early 2000s. So it's been a big thing for a long time in our community. So that's a good thing. But what we want to help people understand is that is also an art form. That's also a kala. That's also a manifestation of spiritual prayer when we do everything. So, the Gatka has become a performance art. To those people who don't realize it, you're actually doing a dance when you're doing the Gatka. So that's actually a kala. It's an art form. So don't, put down art form and understand that, a lot of people who are actually doing Gatka, it's in the mainstream, you're doing an art form because it's not a battlefield art. It's not, a battlefield science of Shastra Vidya. That's actually more spiritually minded, just like, the Japanese, to draw an analogy, still have their ancient schools of samurai teaching their warriors. And it's obviously less common today, but there's still great respect in Japan for, anyone who's a master. And there's very few masters in our community today, just a few old Nihang Singhs. Somebody, there's a controversial fellow as well, to some, and less controversial, others are Baba Nindra Singh. Some people like him, some people don't for his views. But there are people who have the knowledge from the ancient art form still in India today. Even if you don't like one, there are still more traditional people in our community. So it's a kala, it's a prayer. You first have to conquer your mind. And because I've studied how the Japanese, their system is that you conquer your mind. When you go into training, you sit in meditation for an hour or 2 hours. You don't just jump and start picking up weapons. You have to, and you can even control your mind to the extent that you can, levitate. You can use, other energies, and this explains how, when we say Savalak, when we say that the one Sikh was equivalent to many hundreds of thousands of warriors, it was because he was using out-of-world energies, not just a science of how to operate the weapon. He was somebody who was very difficult to defeat at a spiritual level, but we've lost a lot of that, but it still exists. But it requires commitment, right? And that's how the Japanese have understood it. If you want to be a samurai warrior today in Japan, and people still do it, modern youth, they just say, we want to be samurai, and they do it. Then you have to quit your life. It's a full-time job, and quit the modern life and spend 10 years, becoming a spiritual master before you become a master of any weapon or art. So we have to connect with our spirituality and our bir rasa, which is our, the warrior energy, to the actual being a warrior, but also implementing that in the world, because the gurus have given us being a warrior for an objective. There is no point being a novelty display warrior just for the sake of it. Because I don't want to offend, but unfortunately, when we are doing our Gatka, when we are calling ourselves Sikh and we are recalling the qurbanis or the sacrifices or shaheeds of our ancestors, but they did it for the problems that society had at that time. Whether it was Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji, he sacrificed. Guru Arjan Dev Ji sacrificed. Guru Gobind Singh Ji, all his family sacrificed. Now, what sacrifice are we doing today? We're living comfortable lives. Some things happening in Palestine, we're not there. Neither is Khalsa Aid even providing the aid. We're warriors in name, right? And that's not good enough to the Guru Gobind Singh Ji. And I don't want to say that, I don't want to put us down, but I want to encourage and say that we need to actually be warriors. And the needs today are the environmental crisis. The humanitarian crisis is obvious, but the world is suffering. And Mother Earth needs us to stand up and say, we need to be frontline warriors and be on the front line. Wherever they're going to be, mining, we need to be there. Where they're going to block the rivers, we need to be there. Wherever they're going to be cutting the trees. And when they built HS2 in England, a lot of people, protested, but not a lot of Sikhs turned up, only some. It was a huge thing. And we need to be leading the world when it comes to that, because the gurus gave us that one job. If we cannot do that one job, we're not Khalsa. Khalsa was given for a practical reason, not just to benefit and celebrate and enjoy ourselves as a community. We had to sacrifice. And we can only sacrifice if we are trained and ready, physically, mentally, and communally. Our society is not set up so that we can be prepared to say we want to, they're cutting the trees, let's go protest over there and set up an encampment, because we're too busy stuck in the 9-to-5 jobs.
Right. And I think giving that perspective is really helpful for people. And one question we did actually have is around horses. So
yes,
how would you keep the horse, just to build a view for the people, are you going to be keeping the horses, or there'll be seva for the horses? Is it kind of a full working
some
camp
people
operation there?
Might know, if anyone's been into horse riding, I think you will know that riding horses is a special spiritual experience.
Right.
I happened to catch some of the conversation you had with a Penji from, Kenya recently, and she's into horse riding.
From Nairobi. Yeah.
So I caught that intro and I'm like, I had that same experience as she did, the same experience. Beautiful. That it's such a special thing. Beautiful. When you're grooming a horse, you just want, you bond. And, I also had that experience where the horse cantered and I didn't know what to do. And, I was just running off into the hills. It was down in Southampton in New Forest. I was learning. And for anyone who wants to learn, there's a place called Burley Villa in the New Forest and National Park, and they teach Western riding. So horse riding is something which a horse along with the lion are our totem spirit animals. The Guru Gobind Singh Ji and the Nihang Singhs know this. They practice this. They bow down to the horse as if Guru Gobind Singh Ji is there. So it's very, very sacred to them. It's like the main seva. Anyone who wants to learn seva, they'll put you with the horses first, right? You bow down, you do matha take to the horse. And it's such a sacred being for us. We need to honor. And fortunately, in the UK, you still have nature outdoors, because that's important when you want to talk about horse riding. In Punjab, the Nihang Singhs, all they do is they have to tie up their horse and they'll just go in a little bit of circle on the road right now. And they're not really riding very much these days. It's only during Hola Mahalla where it comes out. But being horsemanship is not just about knowing how to ride. You have to know what a horse eats, how to feed, how to take care, first aid. But we go beyond Western horsemanship. We have spiritual horsemanship. And in the Western sense, for somebody who might know or might, who wants to know, training of horses in the West, they break the horse, right? They force the horse to become docile from its wild state, to accept a rider. And they have a bit in the mouth, and that really hurts their mouth. And a lot of them will develop tics, they'll develop mental health problems. I've taken care of horses who, have these nervous tics, and they cannot be ridden anymore. They've been broken so badly, and the bit has been put into the mouth and pushed onto the tongue, because that's how Western English riding works, or most Western riding, is you have an iron bit, which is right at the back of the horse's mouth, and you tug on that, and it really hurts, and it scares the horse into going the way you want to go. But they've now, people have come up with the bitless bridle, but the Nihang Singhs rode bareback, just with a sheet, no saddle, right? And that's something which you might have seen in the films. If you've seen like Dances with Wolves with Kevin Costner or something like that, you might have seen Native Americans on bareback. That's Nihang Singhs are basically bareback. They're riding bareback, and that's a special skill, right? Not anyone can just jump on a horse bareback and ride without any bit in the mouth, because there's a spiritual relationship, right? There's a connection. And as a horse rider myself, and anyone out there who's ridden, you put your life on the horse. Anytime you get off, the original Superman, he broke his back, became paralyzed. So we need to conserve the original Guru's horsemanship. Fortunately, it still exists, but unfortunately today, it's on the decline in Punjab. The quality of horses, their care, I notice, because I know horsemanship, that a lot of the horses on Hola Mahela are unwell, they're unhealthy, they've not been bred very well, they're weak, they've been ill taken care of, or they have been abused, or they have been, ridden into the ground, or, or they've not been ridden enough, because in Punjab, where do you go? You can't really ride your horse. They just tie them up the whole day. In the UK, you have bridle. In England, you have bridleways, and in Scotland, you still have the right to roam. So you can go wherever you want, effectively speaking. It's a Scandinavian culture that's in Scotland enshrined by law, that you can go on estates as long as you don't disturb standing crops. In England, they're still fighting for that right. But all the, before the roads existed, there were horseways, right? Even, and many of them have been preserved as bridleways. Only horseback is allowed. So if you ever, want to ride in England, and I encourage people to do so, you can cross the country. And it was my dream that I wanted to do this, and I hope others carry on and take up this dream. Do a program where Sikhs ride from south to north, right? Ride up the country, ride around the country, ride the coastlines, because the coastal ways are still there, the bridle ways are still there. Ride it. And the Guru Gobind Singh Ji, and we tell stories that they lived kathi de upar sonde a, right? Kathi means effectively saddle, but we have a sheet. It's not a saddle as such. But the term, what it means is that we slept on the horse, right, in the jungles. And that speaks to our tribal ancestry. They lived in the jungles, they hunted in the jungles for survival, they hunted game. Diet is something which please remind me, because we need to talk about food and what the decolonial, or what we used to eat before, and why that's important, and how we're going to bring our foods back, and how that's going to boost our health. So horse riding and horsemanship, we want to teach people spiritual horsemanship, and we want to teach people to learn this so that they can take this back, because there's actually more opportunities in the Western world to ride than there is in Punjab, right? So there's not much opportunity. There's roads everywhere, pollution, cars, busy. You can't ride much. There's a great benefit of where we've got this site, is that there's a few hundred acres along the stream of basically public land that's, used to be forest. We want to develop trails there, you know. So there's huge potential for us to develop these trails and actually have a place where we can ride.
I see. And maybe if we can go into the food and basically
Mm,
decolonialize diet, decolonialize our eating, because a lot of people, they might be based in UK and we might have learned cooking from our parents or grandparents who were immigrants,
yeah,
and
yeah,
connecting back to your
yeah,
site with the
yeah.
organic permaculture, we'll
Of
be able
course.
to understand how we were supposed to eat, how that's changed. So if you could help us,
Yeah.
how your eco village is envisioning to help people connect back to that as well.
So we want to help people understand that food is medicine.
Mm,
Anything you put in your mouth or apply to your skin, either way, I'll tell you that as somebody who has that medical background. You eat, you breathe, you apply to your skin or your hair, everything goes inside.
right.
That's how microplastics are now in our bodies. They've been found everywhere. It's in breast milk, it's in testicles, it's in your sperm, it's everywhere now. There's no place left in the human body which no longer has microplastics. And
Which
I'm really a
causes
big, it causes cancers,
infertility.
it causes infertility, it causes your DNA to break down. A lot of the a lot of huge health problems are going to come now, you know, in the next 10, 20 years. We're going to see lots of massive problems in autoimmune diseases where the body attacks itself, and that's all because of our plastics and chemicals. So we want people to you know, wherever you are, I encourage you to try and grow organic food if you can, as a community. And wherever you are, it's not going to be a hard option. If you're in England, most towns and villages, you can apply for an allotment, right? Or find a local community where you can and rent some land or buy some land, because land in the UK or other parts of Europe or especially in America is cheap relatively. You can get, you know, woodland for 5, 10, 15,000 pound an acre, and that's enough, right? It's not a huge amount of money for a family or a community to invest in for their livelihood and for their health, for their well-being. You just need to learn the ways of permaculture so you know how to grow the vegetables between the trees and learn how to forage. And there's so many skills which are available near you. And that's the great thing about the West, is that people have maintained these traditions. There's so many courses you can find on foraging wild mushrooms and herbs, you know, wild garlics, and what's edible, what's not edible. There's so many options for you to learn. I encourage, you know, out there for you to learn to forage wild herbs and foods and to live in an organic lifestyle where you are. But we'll come now to diet, right?
Yes.
And diet is something which is, it has controversies. Again, that comes to those two camps of people, and I'm not in those two camps. I want to know how the gurus lived. I'm
Right.
not interested in people's ideology of whether it should be vegetarian or non-vegetarian, because that's a very silly, what's the word for it? A duality.
Partisan, yeah.
It's a duality of either this or that, but it was not either or. The gurus were actually a bit of both, and that's how our communities lived, because we didn't have a view that, you know, of social taboos, because really if you're vegetarian in India, it's a taboo. Then the meat becomes a taboo, it becomes something which is, you know, anti-spiritual, etc. It's a taboo. And then just because the rivalry exists, you'll find a lot of meat eaters are anti-vegan. They'll criticize them and say you need the healthy fats, and you know, it's, then they have a rivalry, right? I find it strange that, you know, a meat eater should have a problem with the vegan because it's not offensive. The vegan should have a problem because it's offensive to him or her. But either way, there are two camps of people, and but it's not either or, right? What might be shocking, and I'm going to drop some bombshells now, that many of the foods that we consider to be desi Punjabi are Mexican, right? So Aloo, tomato, mircha, potatoes, tomatoes, hot peppers, bell peppers, beans, corn came from the Americas. The Portuguese gave it to us only about 120 years ago. The gurus had never tasted any of this stuff. It didn't exist. Wheat. Our ancestors would very rarely eat wheat. Wheat was used for making sweet dishes and dumplings, maybe kara prasad, right? It was not eaten. It was not a staple diet. It was something which was used to make puddings. That's it. Just sweet puddings. It had no other purpose. Our ancestors' staple diet was bajra, millets. That's what used to grow in Punjab. It's still eaten. It's still the staple diet in neighboring Rajasthan. I'm gluten-free. That's all I eat. I don't eat wheat. And as a health expert, I can tell you that even if you say, oh, gluten's a scam, celiac is just a scam. It's not a scam. Some people, everyone's gluten intolerant. There's nobody in the world who's gluten intolerant. It's just that some people don't notice immediately the effects. Other people do. And some people have an extreme allergy. I'm not talking about an allergy. It's not natural. It's actually poisonous. The gluten protein, the body recognizes this as a poison and tries to get rid of it. So that's why it causes an autoimmune response. Autoimmune means when the body attacks itself because it sees that there's a foreign body, get rid of it. Eventually, the immune system breaks down, and instead of attacking a foreign body, it starts attacking healthy cells. So the body sees gluten as a foreign body. It's a poison. It gets rid of it. A lot of people have been, and unfortunately in our community, we just eat wheat roti is a very common thing. It's the main staple in a gurdwara, in langar, wheat roti, without question. Yeah, no question. Or in the West, bread, whether that's white bread, brown bread, it's gluten, right?
Right.
And white bread is, maida, white bread, refined flour is pure gluten without the fiber and the protein and all of that, which helps to digest. Because you can, as well. Spelt wheat has, with the older forms of wheat, it has less gluten. So it's more digestible, which is why people like to say, let's use spelt flour, maybe rye flour, maybe barley, maybe some other varieties and barley was used in India. I've learned recently that it was also very common, but only amongst certain communities. So, and this is also caste based. So the Jats, their main income in the long past was either milk or wheat as a farm produce. Funnily enough, they didn't necessarily eat the wheat. They sold it for profit. They knew it was unhealthy. Like many people, like I guarantee people who sell you Coca-Colas and all these unhealthy products, the CEO of the company is not going to be drinking this. He knows it's bad, right? He's going to be sipping on some antioxidant fruit berry drink, I guarantee you. So people who, it was just a commercial product, right? And it was not something grown for people's personal consumption. So people ate millets. There's so many varieties of millets, and oats is also gluten-free, which is native to that part of the world. And if you want to eat oats, I recommend groats, which is the whole grain, not processed oats, which is a highly processed food, pre-cooked. You want to have, which actually looks like a long brown seed. If you haven't seen it, it looks like a kernel of wheat or barley. It's just long and slim, and that's unprocessed oats. You can soak that overnight. Takes a little, maybe 10-15 minutes to cook. You cook it like brown rice. Really nice. You can flavor that with anything you want. So go with what's local. But if you look at our Punjabi diet, we ate millets, bajra, jawar, and kodra. These are different types of millets. Some of it was cooked and fermented. So kodra is a grain which you would cook overnight like a porridge and eat it the next day when it's fermented in a clay pot. I know a lot of Singhs in my community who are bringing this knowledge back. And they're actually trying to grow these grains in Punjab now, which is a great thing. And so Bajra is our ancestral diet. You have to understand evolution. If a group of people have evolved eating something over tens and thousands of years, that's what their body needs, right? And when people in the Western sense, they try and give out the Western science, a lot of Western science is based on North European male bodies, not even female, right? Medical science. And it doesn't, we're different. I'm not being racist here, but we're different in terms of what we need. Like to give you a small example, the Inuit who live in northern Canada, there was a huge public movement. The Western, healthcare system said these people are not getting vitamin D because there's not much northern sunlight. There's winter like 6 months, 12 months. So they said you give them supplements, but they became ill with the supplements, right? Then they did studies and realized that actually their body is designed to operate with much less vitamin D than is required from other people who originated in the tropics and who need much more. Their metabolism is different. Their bodies burn fat differently. They store fat differently. They can metabolize fat into vitamin D from seal fat, which other people don't have the DNA to do that. We're all different. So, and this speaks to, and because I know this, you mentioned there's a lot of people in your audience who may be from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different parts of the world. Know and understand deeper, and don't go into the politics of it, but understand how your ancestors lived. And that feeds into what you should be eating today. So if we talk about Punjabis or Indian people in general, people were eating millet grains, along with a huge diverse number of vegetables and what we call dals. Some of the beans, and I'll mention that, came from Mexico, but we had a lot of our own dals and lentils, which we still eat today. And foraged vegetables are really important for us. This was our staple diet in the past: nuts, seeds, berries, vegetables, and a staple grain such as oats in where you are, or over here we had millets. In other parts of the world there would have been wild rice, not even just white rice, not even brown rice, wild rice from the lakes. That's the healthiest rice. And when it came to wheat, yes, people have had it, but that's what happened was when people stopped becoming, or the earliest colonization of Europe came hand in hand with agriculture and wheat. And that's something we've written and explained in a lot of detail. And the whole history is on that website of gurmatkhalsa.org, of how the colonization of Europe occurred. Because what wheat did is it made people reliant upon the market economy, right? Because these colonizers came in and people they were foraging. It's free, right? If you're hunting and foraging, it's free. You have a lot of land, you hunt, forage, grow a little bit of grain and vegetables here and there. It's free. And the whole jungle is your garden and your supermarket. But what they did is they colonized people, they cut people's orchards, they cut people's trees. They said, we're going to give you wheat. And what that did is that reduced people's life expectancy. So that's why they talk about history and say people used to have just a life expectancy of 35 years. So a lot of people died. Some people lived, on average, life expectancy was low because of a lot of people dying in infancy. People were malnourished because you can't just survive on a diet of empty calories of wheat. So most people, and 90% of Europeans and British, were peasant labor, right? Only 10%, or 8 to 10%, were the middle classes who were gentlemen farmers, and only the 1% were the very elite who could even afford meat. The meat and honey and milk were for the elite. And the same applies in India. The Indian cow was revered, but the Indian cow doesn't give much milk. It's not like today. So that's for the vegetarians out there. It's my personal view. It's the research that I've done as well. The Guru's philosophy was live with nature. Live what's local. Live which is, what is organic, and live with love. How can we say pyar if we want to exploit and a lot of people will understand, even meat eaters would, argue that taking the milk of the animal is worse than killing the animal, right? You might as well kill the animal. So the gurus did not really consume dairy. Kyo and ghee was there for the special occasions, right? That maybe the diya lamps was the major use, and religious ceremonies. When you have the havan in home, you need the ghee, and also maybe for the kara prasad and things like that. So it was simply factually, historically, it was not available because the cows were not artificially bred. They only got pregnant 2 or 3 times in their life, and they just desi cow or buffalo produces a very little amount of milk, just enough for its child. So it was very rare, very exclusive. Only if you were very extremely, even if you had a cow, you would sell that. You would not keep it for yourself. You would sell that because it was gold,
So some
right?
people
Because it
might,
was,
sorry, want a bit of clarity there, because I remember we
yeah.
did cover in the Prem Sumara Granth. It does say
Gigi.
to have ghee, like
Yes,
almost
yes,
every
yes.
day,
So
or
Prem
it's
Samara
very far.
Granth is very much written from the perspective of the Sanatan Sikh. As
Okay,
I said, I'm not going to go into either camp because I don't belong to either camp of the Sanatan or the anti-Sanatan,
I see.
right? Even the title of the book is, it's a Sanatan Sikh. So it was written by somebody who describes themselves as a Sanatan Sikh. So their culture is derived from the Aryan culture, which is very much orientated around milk. But still, nevertheless, even if it says in the Granth, and even if somebody was a Sanatan Sikh 300 years ago, milk was simply non existent. It was extremely rare, and it was only used on special occasions. It was not prevalent. What was much more prevalent was you would go and hunt. And that's what the gurus did, right? There was animal fat, lard. Lard was common, not ghee. It was simply not available. It was extremely rare and expensive and valuable for religious and spiritual reasons. It was not a food source. If there was a animal food source, it would have been animal fat lard, which you might be familiar with. And that even in the West, that was such that if you're in a society which rears animals or hunts animals, it's in much great quantity. You would use that to make soap. You would use that to make candles. Not just food. It was in so much quantity that you could make soap and candles from it, right? We're not waste. Kyo is so expensive even today that we're not going to burn it on just making soap and candles, right? But animal fat and lard, which is people say unhealthy, but it's better than kyo in that respect because it's available in big quantities. The guru's principle was one of being organic, local, and cruelty free. They're simple principles. Anyone can relate to these principles without the politics. So cruelty free does not mean you don't kill animals, but it means that only when you need. So the gurus, from what I've understood, and I've talked to elder people and I've done this research, is their diet is neither vegetarian nor vegan nor non-vegetarian. It's none of these things. It doesn't fit in any box. They could go for 10 months of the year being a vegan and 2 months eating meat every day because they hunted game, right? And it would depend on where they are. It depended on the season, and it depended on need. Still today, because we have lost that contact with animals, and this may not sit well with some of the Akali Nihang Singhs. Even Chatka does not come from our culture, it comes from the Rajputs. It was a borrowed culture because we didn't keep animals in captivity. Chatka means you kill the animal in captivity. But every single historical resource prior to the Nihang Singhs is not Chatka, it's hunting. Every single Sakhi, every single scripture before the 17th century, even before Prem Samara Granth, which is 18th century, early 1700s, is exclusively hunting. The gurus hunted, and they did. The gurus hunted, they eat meat. That's also there in the Sakhis. The vegetarians say, oh, they eat meat they gave a reason for it, right? But they eat meat when they hunted, and just like the Native Americans, anytime they hunted, they would do so with great prayer, great respect. They would not hunt the very old because they're wisdom carriers. They would not hunt out of season. And if you're ever been into hunting or fishing, you would know there are very strict rules in place. You can't hunt, for example, you can't fish during certain times of the year because that's their spawning season. You know, hunts for certain animals are banned during certain periods of time because they're trying to migrate or they're trying to rear their young, or birds are laying their eggs or whatnot. So they were very spiritually connected to the nature around them. They knew they had a bond with the animals, and the animals gave their life, you know, without much, you know, fuss. But it was a hunting, and with traditionally with the bow and arrow and the spear. Now the bow and arrow and the spear is just something that people hold in programs and wave it about, and they're not sometimes not even real, right? They will hold this big, heavy iron arrow, where you have light wooden arrows like a crossbow. So people are not hunting. Even the modern Nihang Singhs are. I have hardly heard of anyone who is hunting. Maybe people Singhs might live in America. Maybe they're hunting there, but I'm rarely. People are doing the Jatka for their personal cultural reasons, and they're entitled to do what they want to do. But historically, the gurus were hunting for need. So the chamra for the tablas, the joras, where does that come from? You have to hunt for it, right? The skins of the animals were really important for the drums. The bones of the animals were really important. For example, if you want to make the dilruba, the musical instrument, the bridge is made traditionally out of bone. The frets are made out of bone. You need animal bones. You need animal parts and things. The gurus use leather regularly, right? The historical the sheets for the weapons. Now this is I made this. I do leather work. Although I'm largely vegan, I follow the guru's principles. So all the guru's ancient artifacts that you find in Sri Keshkar Sahib, when they presented saying this is the guru's original Gatra, this is the guru's original Shri Sahib, and all the miyar, that is the sheath of their swords and kirpans, they're all covered with leather. They were using leather. The leather came from hunting. They hunted the leather. They used all parts of the animals. During hunting season, they would hunt. Otherwise, they would forage in the forest for wild foods and berries. Both. They were hunter-gatherers as well as growing food in gardens. But they were not rearing animals domestically. They were not keeping pigs and chickens. Chickens actually came from Asia. Eggs did not exist in India. Chickens did not exist in India. If you were on the coast, you would have fish. So let's not forget Punjab used to be very big. It used to go all the way up to the coastline of the Arabian Sea in Karachi, right? So we used to have a supply of salt coming in from there, from the seaweed coming in from there, because that's a really important source of nutrients for us in the world, which is iodine. In the modern world, people have an iodine deficiency, which is a cause of many health problems that people don't know about, especially in women. Many cancers and many women's health problems because of a lack of iodine. So in the West, because people have forgotten about these ancient ways of living, people used to consume iodine. So somebody might be in a native tribe right in the middle of the United States, nowhere near the coast, thousands of miles away from the coast. But they have now found, in their architectural digs, they have found that wherever any tribe always had seaweed and salt from the coast. They knew it was valuable. They traded for it. Because that's what gave them what they didn't have locally. We had this coming in from, because Punjab used to be on the ocean. It's not there anymore. But we had our own access to the ocean and seaweed and fish. And the gurus used to also fish. That used to be something which was very common, right? And there were streams and rivers and ponds in Punjab full of fish. No longer exists. So that's something which is something which might be new information to a lot of people. I'm not encouraging people to now start eating meat and fish and hunt and do all these things. because a lot of people have a consensus for, in langar should be vegan, for a lot of people, and that's what we will have at the at the Dharamsala. We don't want to offend anyone, and a vegan meal is offensive to nobody, right?
Yes, beautiful. So I want to tie back to the Eco-Village, the Mata Nanaki, Khalsa Eco-Village, and kind of if you can give people a view. I think we've covered a lot of topics where they could seek to learn.
We have, yes.
Kind of, what are the now phases of development you're looking into? I know you've had 5 phases of development. If you could tell people a little bit about your team as well, so how you're looking to kind of move forward as well.
But I think it's a good point to, explain to the Sangat of where we are in this project, as you say. So we've actually spent, this is not an idea. It's been more than 12, 13 years in the making. A lot of Sangat has been involved. A lot of knowledge has been gained. Sevadars are ready. We've got a lot of families involved. And what this really boils down to is we want to create the space for Sangat. It's like a Gurdwara times 100, because there's so much more going on. There will be a little, the mud hut, the bunga, with the Guru Granth Sahib Ji written by hand, and that's the little Gurdwara. But it's surrounded by so much more than just that. It's much more than a Gurdwara. It is a living Gurdwara of nature, is how I think Dr. Kamalrup Singh Ji had described once before. And we want to give people an opportunity to attend camps, stay, experience the lifestyle, attend workshops, attend retreats, do seva. And we've divided this into a 5-year plan. So we want to have to start with actually buying the land. And so it took us so long to find this land. It's been such a long journey. Once we found it, there were difficulties to negotiate, but we're actually now competing, unfortunately, with a hotelier. So they've got big money to spend. And so we pleaded, and he said, right, okay, the landowner, who's a local, that we'll give you this month up to the end of August, fundraise, do your thing. So that's why we've launched a GoFundMe to personally, because I'm just a Guru Sevadar. I've put in £50,000 in this project. And if I had more, I'd put it in. But I don't, I'm an individual. And I quit working, the 9 to 5 a long time ago. So that's, money I've had saved up that I'm happy to give because, I'm just a Sevadar. So, but we'd still need another £100,000. And for other people elsewhere, that's about 150,000 Canadian dollars, or about 130,000 US dollars, or maybe about 125, 30,000 euros. So we need that to actually buy the land, and we'll put that in a trust. And we will then start phase 1. And we've listed this in the brochure, and maybe we can link that afterwards. And I've loaded that on a website, and you can put a link to that. And basically phase 1 is going to be where we actually start to plant the trees. That's going to be this winter, hopefully, that we sort out the legalities, get the paperwork done, and do the boundaries, and then prepare some basic infrastructure so that when Sevadars come, there's langar available, there's place to stay, be it rudimentary. We'll be putting yurts and, bell tents and that kind of thing to begin with, which we already have ready to go. So that's going to be phase 1. And the rest of the project, we've divided it into stages, and everything's going to be with community. So next year we want to start building the bunga, the mud huts, the clay huts, our traditional cob architecture with thatched roofs. And that's a spiritual architecture. I talked about it with Balraj Singh yesterday. And if there's still time, I'll speak a little bit about that to you, or we can do another session where we can go into what's been missed. So we'll be having workshops right away, retreats right away, Khalsa camps right away. We'll be bringing in horses, starting with the organic food, teaching permaculture, and slowly we will build up the infrastructure. It's going to be very basic and rustic. It's not going to be 5-star luxury resort AC. It's going to be hands-on, right? You're going to be in tents, in yurts, in the mud huts, outdoors, where the weather permits, maybe just sleeping in the gazebo, with the mosquito nets. So it's going to be very much elemental. And we want people to switch off. Come here, deposit your mobile phone. If you need to check it once a day, do that. But otherwise, we'll put in a locker with your, name on it. And we want people to switch off when they come here, connect with the elements. But we can't do any of these great things that we have planned. Year 2 or 3, we want to set up the permanent art gallery, right? And we want to then build a big thatch cottage on one of the sites where we can have a permanent place for workshops, for herbal medicines. We want to have a wellness clinic. We want to have, as I said, the art gallery, and we want to start making herbal soaps. You and I were talking about soaps and other herbal products yesterday. We want to teach people all these skills and take them back to their communities. And eventually, we want to actually then invite, and there's been interest for some families out in other countries saying, is there going to be a place to stay? Can we live here? There will be, but not initially. Maybe a few years down the line, once we're set up. It takes a good 5 years, for an organic farm to become productive, for fruit trees to become productive, and we'll be a bit more financially. There's not going to be many expenses, but if we want to expand, if we want to do our workshops, we want to do our conservation, we want to do our Seva, then we might have to pay for people's travel accommodation, maybe buying some more land. But we need this initial 5 acres of land. Ideally, we only needed half of it, but it comes as a lot. There's 2 sites. I wonder if maybe you can put up the picture. Is that possible? Can you share a screen and put up a picture on your Zoom?
All the pictures we can also do at the start, so this will be edited afterwards. So as you talk,
yeah. So I'm imagining that it's on the screen now, right? And we're looking at a design. This is lot A. So this shows us, the agricultural side of things. It's going to be 1699 Cultural Museum, and you'll see the mud huts in the middle and a lot of nice pictures of horses and cows, and and we're going to have some dairy, right? Because it's cultural, even though it's not necessarily what the gurus had, because we have to provide that source for spiritual reasons at the very least, for the Kara Prasad, for the home, etc. So the idea is that we then develop the second site, which hopefully you have up on screen. And this is going to be where we have a little nature conservation. There's a jungle, and we're going to have the bird observation cabins on one side, a little bit of wetlands on the other side. And there's going to be, we're going to convert and divert the excess rainfall and make a fountain and water, which I think historically was there on the land in the past. So that's going to give us an actual place where we can meditate. And I will talk about waterfalls and our connection in a minute, if you will remind me. So these sites have been well designed, well planned, and I hope that you like these designs. But we need your help, because £100,000 within a month is what we have to raise. And we've got the GoFundMe, which is Khalsa Village. I'm sure Virji will share the link. And please do support us, because we can only do this with the love of Sangat. And if you do happen to know individuals who might want to sponsor the project, either in part or in whole, we're more than happy to, name the museum or the art gallery or even the entire site in your honor, if you are able to, help us make that, reach that goal. But everything counts, even if it's a small amount. We suggest £100 or $100 to begin with. We're calling that Khalsa Hero. I think everyone Khalsa should be a hero. So at least if you can put in that much. We've got, very kind people who have started us off, but we're hoping to spread the word and maybe get a couple of big donations and donations from our heroes as well. So that's where we stand. And eventually, year 5, this is not just going to be a project that you forget about. We want to run the camps. We want Seva is going to be happening all the time here. all the seasons, there's going to be Seva and camps happening here. Wherever you are in Punjab or outside of Punjab, come here, benefit. As you know, if you've got special skills to share, give it to us. We've got a Panji who's specially learned how to make the Khalsa blue color, right?
Yeah, maybe we can also
We
talk about that indigo
Yeah,
blue
I
dye.
wanted to talk about a few of these things, like
Mm.
the Khalsa blue color. So um, so this project, after 5 years, we're hoping that it will become like a model that we can replicate. We can share our knowledge to others, saying, go to Scotland, make a Dharamsala there, make an eco-village there. We will tell you how to do it. Make it elsewhere in Punjab. We want this to become a network. We want to help give birth. This is like a mother, Mata Nanaki. We want to help give birth to sites elsewhere. Take this knowledge back to your community. That's what's going to be, revive the spirit of the Khalsa, is if it's available. Because yes, we want to bring people in, but how many people can have the time or afford to travel all the way to Punjab regularly? It's a luxury for many. And maybe it's a lifetime opportunity for some. So we want people to say, come, learn, and we want to teach you. Take these principles, go back to your communities, do the same thing there, maybe on a small scale, maybe on a big scale, right? Because land is more available elsewhere. Have hundreds of acres of land if you can, benefit the local community, share that knowledge, give people the opportunity to have the Dharamsala where anyone in the world, whether they're white European, African, whether they've come into Gurmat for the first time, I don't like to say Sikhi or Gurmat for the first time, if they say, like the Hindus have their ashrams. There is a Hare Krishna ashram, I think, in Coventry or somewhere, and they're doing permaculture. And if somebody wants to learn, stay there for 5 years. You can join the Hare Krishna that way. Where do we have our places where you can spend 6 months? Where do you live? Everything people have to organize themselves. You have to learn. You have to go to different experts to learn the different histories and skills. We want this to be in one place like it used to be, like it needs to be. And we want to help heal Mother Earth. And we want to, but we can't do this without buying the land. So hopefully you'll, at this point, maybe put something up on the screen which shows us the GoFundMe, and share that afterwards.
Yep, so I'll put all the links in the description below so people can just have it all the time when they're watching this video. If we could maybe go on to just talking about, like who's in your team right now.
Yes.
And we could also just talk about, I think, the Khalsa Blue and the waterfall you wanted to kind of finish up on.
Yeah. I'll finish up on that. I think that's a nice place to finish up on, just to leave people with a bit of an appetizer of, something special that we're going to bring back, which means a lot to us. So our team is, from many countries, from the UK, Canada, Malaysia, as far that way, and Punjab as well. We've got people in the local village, who are experts in Ayurveda, yoga, even aromatherapy for those who are interested. There's facilities available nearby. Although we're not formally associated with them, but there's facilities available. Our team members, have really been dedicated. We're a close-knit community and we're all bringing something special to this. It's not just one man's dream or a project. I am, a founder, but I see myself as a lead sevadar, a mukh sevadar, if you want to call it that. My job is to organize and inspire others to become involved. And I'm, you out there who are listening, I'd like to inspire you to give us your time and join the team. We've got people like a Panji, and maybe this fits into the blue color. There is our Khalsa blue, Hopefully earlier you could see that I was wearing blue. My dastar here, the mala, is hand-woven fabric. It's also dyed blue. Our ancestors used to live very much in spiritual relationship with cotton. Cotton is our, it's something which is sacred to us. Some of the origin stories I've learned studying about the Indus Valley civilization and the Aboriginal tribes, the ancient tribes of Punjab, their origin stories are very much like the Native American origin stories of Spider Woman weaving the world. We had origin stories, when I say we as Asians, as Punjabis, of, you know, a mother figure who was weaving the world from webs of cotton. It was such an important origin myth to us, or a story of our founding as a sacred gift. But unfortunately, and you know, cotton originated from us. It's a Punjabi thing. It was also found in maybe South America separately, but taken there from ancient times. But it came from us. And one of the things that came alongside was the colors, especially the blue color, our Khalsa color, our Nila Rang. We all know that Guru Gobind Singh Ji wore blue, and today Nihang Singh still wear blue. Then, you know, some of the Nishan Sahibs are still blue. The Bana, very often, a lot of people wear blue. But it was hand woven, and that means they had a charkha, which is a spinning wheel. Maybe I can do a demo on live sometime. I've learned that. When you hand spin cotton, it's a spiritual endeavor. Every time you do it, you're doing your Simran, you're doing your Vaheguru, and that energy goes into every fiber. We need to connect with this if we want to understand not just how our ancestors lived, but Gurbani. There's a lot of Gurbani written by Bhagat Kabir ji, who describes, because he was a weaver, who describes the weaving process as an analogy for spirituality. But if you've never woven, you don't know anything about it, you're not going to understand that analogy in Gurbani. How will you understand when they describe the wefts and the warp of the fabric and how that comes together if you don't know anything about cotton, if you don't know anything about weaving? Now, our grandparents' generation has cement, right? Maybe I've spoken to a lot of older women in Punjab, and in their youth, they were still making cotton. And daris, ladies would prepare these very colorful daris, that is hand-woven blankets, and that would become the wedding gift that you give to your daughter-in-law on her marriage, or your daughter. And that was such a valuable thing. When Guru Nanak Dev Ji got married, Baby Nanaki gifted him a hand-woven set of bedsheet and handkerchief. That was the gift. That was the wedding gift. It was such a valuable thing. Today, you can buy it from the market, you know, for maybe £10, right? And people just buy the Ramallah, put it on the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, done. Imagine the amount of effort it would have taken her 6 months or a year to prepare that, right? With the Simran, made from hand-woven cotton, with all the natural dyes. Our Bana, and we touched upon the Shashtar Vidya, we had outer body, otherworld strength. But we also had the Bana. The women, and this is women's job, and women out there learn, you know, this is your ancient crafts, something to connect you to your grandmothers and your ancestors. Women have such an important role to play. Even on the battlefield, the protection of the gurus and Sikhs' grandmothers was with them, because the Bana was hand woven. Every single stitch was done with Vaheguru. And if you know how to weave, every single weave is with Vaheguru. Imagine the strength, you're bulletproof, you're arrow proof on the battlefield. That also explains how Sikhs were so successful. They're carrying the physical blessings. That's why I really emphasize that spirituality is not just words and feelings and happy thoughts. It is physically manifest. And really, women and girls out there take interest in the arts and crafts because it has spiritual manifestation. Another crafts that we would do in the daris, I said, the daris had patterns and designs. For example, peacocks and other local trees and shapes, and that would tell a story. It was women's work in a community it would effectively become like a tapestry. And that tapestry would carry your spiritual understanding, your cosmology. It's not just some random ethnic textile that looks nice. And if you study other Native American communities and other tribes out even in Australia, Africa, women are still weaving. They meditate, and whatever comes into their mind, they weave it into their fabric. We had that. Our grandmothers had that. They were making duris. They were carrying their spiritual dreams. And that's something which is such an important aspect of the Sikh community, Punjabi community at large as well. But it was such an important aspect of our culture. And these are the kind of cultures that we want, that people have lost, disconnected from. We want to encourage women and men to learn different cultures and connect and build that bond with your ancestors. Manifest your spirituality, not just sitting and doing the Simran, which is great. You do it. Please do the Kirtan, but manifest it. Manifest that. And it's not just art that you can sell. You can't sell this. This is something which is sacred for the family. It's a gift. It's an heirloom that your your forebears down the road, your offspring or the future generations down the road, aane wale peediyan, we will say in Punjabi, they will benefit from this heirloom. You will become, the grandmother who wove this tapestry expressing, the Khalsa as it is coming in your meditation. Something should happen in your meditation. It shouldn't just be doing meditation and feeling happy. Something should be coming. Express that in as an art form. Give that cultural gift to your future generations. Make the bana so that Singh Sahib can go into battle and be prepared. Singhaniya can, when that's a topic for another time, be warriors as well. It's a different topic. But women have a spiritual role which goes beyond the battlefield. So the color blue is a special process. It comes from an indigo blue leaf, which if you crush it, right, it will stay in your hands, but it won't give you blue. You have to ferment this in a very particular way using a very specific starter and very specific conditions in a big clay vat in the right season underground for more than 6 months to produce a natural deep blue natural dye. Because we've lost this, we don't have it anymore. All our Nishan Sahibs, our Bane, everything is made from chemicals, fake, artificial. And that's really bad. If you study this, the natural artificial dyes, especially the blue, is really toxic and poisonous for water. So if you're wearing blue, you have poisoned fish and you have, caused environmental destruction somewhere, where be it India or China or somewhere or the other, wherever that fabric came from. People are wearing polyester. That's basically microfibers, microplastics, but you're applying to your skin. If you remember, I told you anything you apply to your skin goes in your body. And you might be surprised to know there's only a few places in the world who still have this process. They got it from us. We gave it to them a long time ago. The Japanese have it, the Rajasthanis have it, and the tribals in the east of India have it. They've had it from the beginning. So there's only these places. One of our group, Panji Sahiba Kaur from Delhi, she went and learned this process. She spent months there, she learned it, and she's ready to teach us about how to make the indigo blue. So we're bringing together, and if you have knowledge and skills, come to us and give it to us in any field. If you know how to make the traditional instruments, come to us. If you know much about anything such as maybe madani, maybe if you're good at pottery, maybe you're good at clay, maybe you have learned thatchery in England because it still exists there. Bring those skills so that we can become a repository of those ancient skills and crafts over here.
And Purataan art, horse riding,
and the art and the art form.
So much
if you
spoke about.
There's an artist who reached out to me today who is currently in Anandpur Sahib. He wants to meet me. I said, I'll meet you. He does calligraphy and art. I said, please teach us. Become one of our team members. Because we want to do calligraphy. So this blue color we want to bring back, not just for environmental reasons, because it's our identity. How can we walk around wearing plastic, right? We're walking around basically wearing plastic head to toe. It's not real. Let's be authentic. Let's be spiritual. Let's be connected and organic. And let's support the Mata Khalsa, Mata Nanaki Khalsa Eco-Village or Dharamsala. And the waterfall, I want to end there.
And I just wanted to add another point as
Hanji.
well before we go
Hanji.
into that, which was really beautiful. It was we were also talking yesterday, and actually you were just saying about metaphysically, maybe as you're doing spiritually, that the leaders are having that transmission, and I think that's really beautiful. Talking about, yes, there's an indigenous aspect, but also this artistic aspect. Like the gurus did were pioneers, so they also were artists. Like they also upgraded their firearms into guns, so it wasn't like they were also rejecting technology. It's just that they integrated it, which I think is important for people to hear.
It's important to know. I mean, and there is some of that as well. I think, I don't know if you asked me or who asked me, we're going to be off grid. There will be a solar system because we might need that, right? To charge these phones and do other things. We want to be mostly switch off grid. We don't want to have that kind of, connected lifestyle. So we're going to incorporate some of those things, but we really want to bring back, because our jivan is akal. Akal means timeless and ever changing. And there are many basic principles which have been with us for tens and thousands of years. And the gurus incorporated that and gave it to us as our identity. So our identity goes back, in other words, tens and thousands of years in Punjab, because they gifted that heritage to us and saying, this is you, this is Khalsa. Of course, at the time, everything still existed, right? They had to bring back a couple of Aboriginal things like the sacred dances and things, which were very rare, even during their time. But a lot of the weaving, the technology, the indigo blues, the mud huts, the thatches, the horsemanship, it was there, right? They decided, because they are representatives of Akal Purkh, right? They were not ordinary human beings. They gave us, and this is how every native tribe in the world has ever been given anything, is a sacred gift. In other words, our origin goes back to the beginning of effective time of human evolution, because our ancestry is a spiritual ancestry from Satyug. The gurus came from Satyug. They didn't just suddenly turn up.
And so on.
They are the Brahm Avatar, the Shiv Brahma Avatar, the original Avatar from the beginning of time. And the gurus have given us that gyan. And yes, you're right that it was an artistic way of living, a creative way of living. It wasn't a drab life where you just do your 9 to 5, you're stressed, and art is maybe a hobby for some. It wasn't a hobby. It was something that you did every day. Every day there was some kind of creative output occurring, and maybe not in the way that we understand not traditionally, but contemporary art, where you would take a piece of paper and produce something. It could be as simple as, and this is something which still exists in some rural parts of India, Rajasthan, even Punjab. It could be storytelling. It could be the puppeteering, right? Somebody would take the interest on, making puppets and telling stories. Somebody would take the interest in what in modern art terms they call temporary art or destructive art. So it could be that you go to the riverside and you prepare artwork in the sand, but it's going to be gone by tomorrow. You might be that you prepare artwork with leaves. We still in Punjab, there is still the rangila. There are, people, ladies, girls will make patterns, colorful patterns on the ground. And it still happens sometimes in some Punjabi cultures with colored dyes and leaves and, other things and stones. But that's a temporary art, right? Some of the tapestries as well would be long-term art. So many different art forms. Singing, folk, we've covered folk dance. I didn't mention folk song. In Punjab, we still have the tradition, fortunately, of the folk song, the tadi. The tadi is basically they go around with the saranda and they sing the battle ballads. Traditionally, they went village to village informing people because they were the news, right? They were the traveling news agents. They would tell people what's going on, and they would keep the myths and stories of our ancestors alive. And that's another art form, is singing, and women would sing to children. Children would be growing up in a very musically and culturally and artistically inspired surrounding. And that was something that there were no schools, right? Kids will be on the job basically right from, and when they're old enough, when they're done playing, when they're 5 or 6, you're out learning the skills. But you're spending a lot of time out in nature. And in the Scandinavian countries, they now have forest schools. And we have a Panji who wants to bring forest schools to this, because we're not going to have a school. People say, well, what about school? We're not going to have school. We're homeschooled. And we used to have gurukuls for advanced skills and training. Yes, and we'll have that. But kids went through a process of gurukul, which basically means you sit with your ustad, you learn the Gurbani. You're not going to be learning necessarily about things which are irrelevant. How many people still remember everything that they learned from in the 10, 12 years at school, formal schooling, primary, secondary school? Most of it was lost, forgotten, hardly applied unless you went into a particular field of, and I initially, I did a degree a long time ago. I started off in engineering, that was my first degree. But when in my first year, they taught you everything again. So you didn't really have to come from a mathematical background,
And I think that's really important for parents and people to hear, because people are now also shifting in UK, not just off-grid, organic lifestyle, but also homeschooling, because they're realizing what their kids are being taught, what the education system is.
They're being brainwashed, right?
Level, right?
You used the word, what was it, agenda.
Yes.
Their educational system, if anyone wants to research, this is not my opinion, this is now in the mainstream. You had Mr. Ford, a Ford company, and others who came up with a modern American-based style education system, which was based on the prison system of America. Ring the bell, ready for your break, ask permission to pee, and program you to be loyal, unquestioning of authority, production workers on the production line. If you look at private schools in the UK, they have a much more flexible way of learning. The very wealthy elite private schools that I'm talking about, they have a very outdoor of classroom environment where you might be learning Latin one day, you might be learning something else the other, right? The regimented school system is to keep the poor and the middle classes as loyal slaves to the empire and the big colonial world empire. So I'll exit that. So many people in America, the Amish community in America lives without electricity. They have homeschools and they live really good quality lives. They ride horses, they don't have cars. Why can't we? We claim that we have our lineage of Guru Gobind Singh, but we have become colonized, and it's not our fault. I don't want to say it's your fault. Don't blame your parents, because they did their best, if they migrated, or they did their best with the knowledge they had and the circumstances they had. But if you are aware today, thank your parents, right? And thank the Guru that we can have this conversation, because we're not so far gone that that this conversation is not happening. Right. People are motivated, people are interested, they are inspired. Be that inspiration may be coming from externally, that's fine, right? Whether it's looking at native shamans and saying they have this great medicine, let's learn our own medicines. If they have a Reiki system, we have our own spiritual healing systems. Let's tap into our own ancient knowledges, right? It still exists. There are still healers in Punjab. People are still there who have our own modalities, our own sound healings, our own ways of detoxing. We don't have to use or appropriate or take from and mix and match from others. When we have our own ethnic ways of doing things, let's learn. But some of our own ways means that we have to change our lifestyle. right? Because we then have to be more appreciative of an organic lifestyle. We might have to slowly try and change as a community our economy. There is a Christian-based community somewhere around Oxford. There's a great documentary on YouTube. I'll share it with you in the comments when I can find it. There's a community about 100 years old, and they have been living without money for 4 generations. Nobody owns anything. You need something, you go to the elders and say, I need new clothes, new shoes, they'll give it to you, right? You just do what you're told. Everyone just either does a little bit of work, and everyone eats one langar. They sing their Christian worship, and no one's ever seen a pound note. No one has a bank account. No one has ever paid a bill. No one's ever had to spend money, right? And that's effectively because a couple of people looked at the Bible and said, well, their leader says, Jesus said so and so, so why don't we actually live like that? I think we need more, and I mentioned it before, we need to be honest with ourselves as a community. And I gave you the story of Babaji, who said, if we follow the Guru's hukams, then our life will look different. Yeah. Let's actually be honest and do it for our future generations. Because I think we're doing it now that we have the knowledge. Okay, we were fooled by the colonialists in the past, but it's not our fault. It's not our parents' fault. We were fooled. They did a really good job with their brainwashing and with their agendas, and sometimes they pitted people one against each other and made them fight. And that's a lot of problems in our community in Punjab comes from infighting because, other people are making us fight with each other. But I want people to think about the future generations. Let's try and change our economy, become less reliant upon the world economy. That's what we were talking about on our phone call yesterday, is that the world, this agenda or cabal can only control people through money. Right. If you are living off grid, you're not reliant on their food and their water and their energy, they cannot really control you. In Europe, they controlled people by controlling the food supply. They said, if you want food, you have to buy our wheat. Then people became slaves, right? And they were given food rations in return for labor. They became slaves. We are effectively slaves. We're given just enough, of a fleeting amount of, an illusion of independence. And we assume that this is it. And we are fully independent, free thinkers, and nobody has any control over us. So if we want to say that there is an agenda, we have to admit to ourselves that we have been caught in that web. Right? Maya da chal, we say Punjabi, Maya da chal. We've been caught in that deceit, that illusion. Let's come out of that. We are now smart enough to know what's happening in the world. Let's escape this. If we cannot do it for ourselves, let us encourage and raise our children differently. And whoever's young enough, who's not yet, and some people are stuck, with a mortgage, with family, ties. They cannot necessarily just suddenly say, I want to quit my job and live differently. Although I say you can. And I want you to be inspired by a lot of just ordinary white American folk who do that every day. They just quit their job, they pick up sticks, they buy 10 acres, and they say, we're going to live off grid with some animals and chickens and, and growing whatever we want. And people do it. You can do it. Anyone can do it.
It's the wisdom really of being a good ancestor for the next generations and the
That's right.
next lineage. And
but even as just to finish this point, even as, even if we can't do it as individuals, you can support by supporting the Guru Mata Nanaki, Dharamsala or Eco-Village. You are helping to support that transformation and change in our community. So even if you can put in a little bit of money into this, your Seva is transforming our community and next generation. So you can do it just without even changing your life. If you can't do it, help us, be the change. So that's what I request Sangat ji, we can talk about waterfall maybe some other time.
Yeah, and I think we
because that's
also mentioned the Kogi tribe as well, and how they're
so much
very
to talk
intense
about, so
and
much.
younger
Actually,
brother.
that waterfall I can link that with the Kogi because it's a prayer. It's a sacred
Maybe we
prayer.
can finish on that. Yeah.
We can talk about that. Do you want me to talk about it now or some other
I
time?
think because we started on the big picture of like
Yeah,
everything, maybe we can also end on this. Like they're also calling us a younger brother, or so just
right.
ending on this bigger
Yeah,
context around what's going on in the world, how the natives
yeah, yeah,
see us, and then
yeah.
Mata Nanki's vision, and we can
Well,
close.
I would like to inspire anyone who sees this to imagine that we don't just have a religion or a philosophy. Our spiritual and physical life is deeper than that. I am using the term indigenous because I have studied indigenous nations and tribes and understood that we are an indigenous nation. We are a tribe. This term indigenous is not a term that native people use for themselves. It's for what historians call, non-native people have to have a term to call these tribes. They said they are indigenous. Native people, their term is either a tribal term or just human, right? They're just human beings. They're ordinary people. We are Sikhs. Sikhs are sevaks, students, learners, sevadars. And we are Singhs. Singhs is lions, totem animal, totem spirit. That's our identity. The gurus have given us more than just a way of life, more than just a religious philosophy to apply. We cannot compare ourselves with Muslims, with Christians, with Jews, with anybody else, not even with the Hindus, although we have a lot of relationship with the Hindus, spiritually speaking. But we come from even an ancient lineage before the Sanatan culture, very ancient lineage. And I'll talk about that maybe in another video, that a lot of that the Sanatan culture is a conduit. They got things from the Adivasis, from the Aboriginals, like Ayurveda. Many of the teachings and philosophies were incorporated into Hinduism or the Sanatan way of life from the Aboriginals, right? And then just as early Christianity involved a lot of pagan elements into it and might still have in the Catholic faith, there's still pagan elements which they had absorbed. So it's a conduit. I encourage people to look beyond ourselves as a religion and see that whether you want to call it native, if you're uncomfortable with that term, say deeper spirituality, right? And I want to encourage people to know that everything in life that we do, the Guru gave us for a spiritual purpose. There's no hukum, there is no single element that we can say out of date, no good, obsolete, right? Everything is needed. Even if the Guru might have incorporated something new, they never got rid of the old. They just added. We can add, but we cannot lose. And if something we want to add, we have to see, is it compatible with what we're doing? If it replaces or gets rid of something from ancient times, it's no good, right? The guns that the gurus used were long range sniper rifles. They were not guns like automatic machine guns nor pistols. You had to load them one, little bullet at a time. You could only have one shot. It would take you 5 minutes to reload. It was effectively just, adding to the surprise element, adding to the long range element. It took nothing away from our culture. Mm-hmm. It just added a little bit. I don't think the gurus will be using machine guns and tanks and nuclear weapons, because that doesn't, fit in with the philosophy of the honor of battle. The honor of battle means that a warrior should be able to fight and hand-to-hand combat if need be. And there was always an honor on the battlefield, even with the English and the Anglo-Sikh wars. They did defeat us eventually in the Second War, but there was always an honor on the battlefield, the respect, that you're not just going to mow down the enemy. You're going to have respect for the opponent. There was this honor on the battlefield. We don't have honor anymore with weapons, modern weapons. The gun was just, hardly like an additional type of a bow and arrow for the guru, a different type of a bow and arrow. If we want to incorporate new technologies and new ways of thinking, we have to see, is it compatible with Gurmat? Does it replace our way of life, or does it just give us a little bit of an added benefit, right? There's some benefits that we can take from the Western world. We've got knowledge, more knowledge of health than we have before. We can use that, but without the expense of the guru's way of living in healthy, organic lifestyle. Because if you do that, you're not going to fall sick. But if you fall sick, yes, you can rely upon, some of the health services if you want, right? You can take advantage if you say that we need to use vehicles to get from place to place. But maybe have a vision of reducing that usage, because climate change is a real thing. Oil will run out. Oil, whether it's a battery or oil, you have to buy it. That's a way to control us. A horse gave freedom. Your feet give freedom. Nobody can take that away from you. You just have to feed a horse. You look after your feet. That doesn't require anyone to give you a product that they can take away. So our guru's principles has always been self-sufficiency. It has always been independence. People talk about Khalistan, but we're not independent in our own lives. Wherever we are in the world, what's the point of a Khalistan when we're going to be subject to this great global cabal who's going to control us? We're not independent. The gurus have always lived completely independent from the controls of any empire, any society, any outside controls. They did their own thing. They never bowed down. They never said that, we're going to give up and we're going to do your way, right? Instead, they invited people and said, come, we will teach you how to live. Doesn't matter your background. You could be Muslim, you could be Hindu, you could be any background. Because Sikhs were either Hindu or Muslim mostly from the past, right? We came from somewhere. We didn't just suddenly become Sikh out of no background. Some people today might have a Christian background, may have an atheist background like myself. They could have any background. But, the gurus gave a new identity. That's why we have to change our name. I was born, unfortunately, because my parents decided it would be good for my, because they migrated and it would be good to give me an English name. I didn't like it. I wasn't that in the mirror. When the Panch Pyare gave me my name of Preetam Singh, I fully felt at peace for the first time in my life. And I changed my name legally everywhere. I'm Singh, right? Everything, even my birth certificate, somehow I managed to change that and it says Preetam Singh, right? But for all effective purposes, I was born Preetam Singh. And spiritually, I know that. I talked to my father before he passed, and he was so pleased, because my family culture was one son becomes an Amritdhari. That's our culture. I come from that kind of family. So it wasn't my brother, it skipped him, my older brother, but it came to me. So my father was pleased, and he said that as far as he's concerned, you were born Preetam Singh right from the start. So that's my name. It's a spiritual gift. I encourage people to know that this gift is beyond just a name. We have to be Khalsa practically. This means we have to be prepared for the difficult times to come in the future. We have to give our children an opportunity. If we don't, we're cheating them out of a chance, right? Knowingly, because I'm telling you this, right? So no, we cannot be ignorant anymore, nor can we be complacent, right? Because we can come out of ignorance and have knowledge, but not do any act on it, and that's complacency, and that's even worse. Not doing anything, even though you should. So I think we need to come out of ignorance and then come out of complacency, and work together as a community. Take advantage of somebody like myself who's dedicated to this cause. I'm ready to help, inspire, organize, contribute, put things together, and support this eco-village, support the Dharamsala, because this is one way that we can bring all our ancient knowledges into one place. And so then you can do this as well. Whether it's bit by bit, you can do this. And, I will talk about the waterfalls, Kogi, some other time. Maybe we can do a part 2 to just talk about the spiritual relationship with nature. Maybe that can be a topic on its own right.
Yeah, but for now, I will put everything in the description below, how people can contact you, the link to the PDF as well, so people can have all of the information, the GoFundMe page as well, so people can also access that. And I just want to say thank you very much for this opportunity to share with the Sangat, to lay out all of the philosophical background, the great work you're doing over the years, the sacrifices you and the team have done, and just for everybody as well, just to check out, take your time, go in and understand the project, and also contact Dr. Preetam Virji if you want to learn more and be part of this. Is there anything more you want to add at the end of this dialogue?
No, I think it's a good place to end. You've had a good conclusion. Please support us, because anything that you put is not just a donation. Don't think of it as a charity. Look of it as an investment in our children's future and for the benefit and the khushi of Guruji. That's what I like to end with. So please support us. We're fully a grassroots campaign. We don't have big donors. We don't have big sponsors. If you can link us up, please do. And but otherwise, we're reliant upon individuals like yourself, families like yourself, and be a Khalsa hero. Support us with at least £100 or $1. Go up if you can. And there's some benefits as well that we've put on the description on the GoFundMe. What we're saying is that £100 gets you, a pass, a cultural pass. £500 gets you a family pass for programs and camping. And maybe if you put in 5,000, if you can put in that, then 100 trees will be planted in your name. And if you can find, to give us the dasvand, if you can afford, or if you can connect us to an individual or organization or philanthropist, if you can speak to them personally, you've now heard everything that about this project, and you have the information. Try and fundraise in your communities as well, locally. Spread that word and make it a thing. Let this go viral. The GoFundMe. Make your own videos. Put the video out there. Make your short videos and say, we need to do this. It's not just myself. It's for the benefit of everyone. And so I will, just say that Guru Gobind Singh Ji has given us so much. All the gurus have given us so much. Let's honor our gurus and let's take that forward, walk in a good way, connect with Mother Earth, heal Punjab, heal ourselves, decolonize from all this agenda, and be confident and strong and be prepared for living and teaching others when the time comes for the Khalsa prophecy. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.